Going on, guys? This is the debut stream of Broken Gears Airsoft. I'm Matt, your host. We appreciate you guys taking the time. So we're a newish Airsoft podcast out of Western New York, focused on busting various myths about the hobby. A little bit of, basically one part's that, one part dollar store tech support, and later on, nerding out over some fun gear. So tonight's goal is to show an extended preview of what we have planned for our first season or so as we shift into the recorded content of the podcast itself. We're going to cover a range of topics for about 5 minutes a pop, which will all eventually be the principal topic of a half-hour-ish podcast episode. So we're going to go through that for about an hour and take questions later on, depending on turnout. Now, at this point, you might be saying, wow, it sounds like a lot just for you, Matt. But those of you who know me probably wouldn't put it past me to hire 3 friends to sit here in silence and listen to me speak for the entire night. But the question remains, who are these people? So I'd like to introduce my very knowledgeable crewmates that are really the ones manning the sails as we navigate the list of topics tonight. So in addition to their decades of experience each, I got this idea because they all have, well, formal education is putting it bluntly, but professional backgrounds that make them significantly more credible authorities than racegunfanatic_45 on e-bike reviews. So here we go. Paul. Tell us a little bit about yourself in as much as your background as it relates to Airsoft, your Airsofting background itself, how long you've played, what you like about it, and if you have one, your favorite dumb myth or misconception about the hobby at large.
Sure. So, everybody, I'm Paul. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've been doing Airsoft for about 14 years now that I think about it, man. Okay. A long time.
No significant breaks, just out of curiosity?
I mean, here and there, but sure. Usually I get at least one game in a year at minimum. So I'm, yeah. But, yeah. I, in line with kind of my my professional experience, I tend to take a more technical view of the sport and things like that. So I'll try and lend my knowledge as far as that's concerned, best I can. As far as what I like to do, I like to collect a lot of communist block equipment and things like that. That's the kind of thing I like to do. I also like to kind of dabble in just more sneaky sided things. Favorite Airsoft myth? I would have to say it is more FPS means more range.
It's on the list.
Yes, because it's half true, or maybe a little less than half. But yeah.
That's a good foreshadowing. We'll get into that proper later.
Yep.
Who's up next? Tom. First off, Tom, what's the beer of the week?
Beer of the week,
I'm drinking. Your webcam isn't even working, so we know
yeah, of course not. So I can't actually show it to you guys. So you just have to take my word for it. But yeah, I'm drinking Westbrook Brewing Company's Beer to Drink When It's Hot Outside, and it is a corn lager brewed with key lime puree. And let me tell you, pretty good. Sounds pretty fancy. Is pretty fancy.
Obviously, for liability reasons, we do not condone underage drinking or anything else. But
as long as nobody's watching, that's fine.
Right. We obviously already have one of our chat moderators pretty disappointed about that. I haven't heard about him drinking in 2.5 presidents, but whatever. So yeah,
anyway.
If you have your professional background, your Airsoft background, and favorite stupid misconception, if you have one.
So my professional background, I'm a safety engineer for a large aerospace company. That gives me at least I like to think a little bit of a say when it comes to things like personal protective equipment and things like that.
Our
Airsoft
first topic
background
is iPro.
Yeah, there we go. My Airsoft background, I've been Airsofting for real since about 2005, and by for real, I mean, with an actual group of people, aka the Cult of Mike Haggerty, the other guy that we have here with us. I've been backyard Airsofting since probably 2001. So yeah, I got close to 2 decades of experience under my belt at this point. My main thing in Airsoft, I guess, is kind of like making my own equipment. I view Airsoft as a really good way to basically look at like makerspace stuff and actually making my own equipment, and it's a good outlet for me to actually use that stuff in an environment other than just in my house. So that's where that is. What else were we saying there?
No, that covers it.
I think that's pretty much it, right? Yeah.
Mike, how many decades? Airsoft? And what does your professional background, or what and how is your professional background overlapping with your time spent in the hobby, and your favorite dumb myth about the hobby, if you have one? If you don't, it's not a tragedy.
It's always a tragedy.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's the premise of the show. So.
Yeah, really. So we started out locally here playing Airsoft back in 2001. My brother-in-law dragged me out for a backyard Springer game. I thought it was pretty cool, but it didn't really catch my nerve until he told me they make ones that shoot on batteries. And I was like, oh, okay, I got my attention. My roommate, Josh, and I spent a ridiculous amount of money, ordered a whole bunch of crap, and that's where we all started from here. I've owned 2 stores. I've done tech work on and off for years and years. I don't think I'll ever pick up a gun and go, I really want to take this apart and rebuild it ever again. My background's construction. I've been doing construction my whole entire life in some form or another.
So you know which direction the magazine goes in.
Yeah. The round part things, those go towards the bad guys, from what I understand. So yeah, I've had some fun over the years. We've done some really crazy mods to guns. When the dual sector gears came out, that was a thing. I don't know if I'm sure you guys remember those.
Mm-hmm.
I got a P90 sitting in the garage with dual sector gear in it, and it's so stupid. But in any case, I digress. Background's definitely in construction. Obviously, Airsoft, doing the Airsoft thing for as many years as I have. Worst myth, dumb myth. Everybody goes to an Airsoft game to have a good time.
I'll co-sign that. Yeah.
Ooh,
I'll
that's a good
co-sign
one.
that. It's a myth.
That is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of terrifying sometimes. Some people just show up to be a jerk. So
That's a good point. Cool. Well, that's the dramatis personae by and large. Now, just as I've briefly alluded to why I've thought this was a good idea. Well, criticism, welcome. But one thing I was bored and thought to look up one night a few months ago when we had first hatched this idea was what else was actually out there in terms of Airsoft podcasts. I don't know how many of you guys have our last iteration of our white paper open, but so my highly scientific findings were, dare I say, something maybe a degree or two off from shocking. So I think I was still using Castbox at the time, which is one of the the editor's choice for podcast apps on Android, and they have a fully functional website you can just listen on your desktop. So I have no reason to believe that the search results would be any different anywhere else in terms of what's out there podcast wise. It doesn't work. There's 20 bajillion podcast apps, but it's not like there being 20 bajillion YouTubes. I'm pretty sure they all pull from one of a couple databases that pretty much anyone can upload to. So I looked up literally just the word Airsoft on a podcast app to see what shows up. Right. Here's my bullet points on the first 20 results. Okay. 2 right off the bat sound like early 2000s Counter-Strike team names or BattleTech mercenary companies. I haven't decided which yet. Both of their titles or both of their episode titles are literally just numbered uploads with no description, and I don't think any kind of photo either. So without diving into the show head first, there's no way to tell what they've covered when or in what order. I mean, when you see things like that, you also can pretty safely assume they don't have the production value where they do a 5-minute cold open at the beginning of every episode. So there's 2 already. 5 of them weren't even in English. That's absolutely fine, but it's just not applicable to us as competition. Multiple shows, I don't have an exact number because this is months old information, were pretty specific to one area. So I mean, it's obviously of limited use to anybody what the opinions of 5 guys are in Iowa about their local scene. A litany of shows were just kind of generic, all things Airsoft, which most of weren't even active or didn't make it very long in the first place. So back to, again, just overlapping with a lot of information I've already dropped. It wasn't really 20 results, it was 15 results, adjusting for the non-English shows. 7 of them made it 5 episodes and uploaded content in the past year, okay? 2 of which just skated by with their latest episode as of, around last May, being right around last May. So, in terms of anything like this being out there so far, the one thing I found, whose name I didn't write down, as far as podcasts, was one that was even remotely explicitly new player oriented. And very few had logos that, again, just as a very rough metric of the production values, didn't harken back to the days of Counter-Strike Source Team MySpace pages. Short story long, I think we're pretty safe as far as whether there's a market for this. And the question then just becomes if this is a medium where a lot of guys listen to podcasts. There's some.
Well, I guess we'll find out, won't we?
Stuff like that where really there's not. Well, there's certain stuff out there where there's not a whole, not much of a scene because there's no demand for it. And as Tom just said, yeah, we are in part setting out to figure out which is the case. My one last note is that just in terms of why we would bother is that I was remembering one of our last visits to, I don't know if any of you had met me there, the big swap meet over at John's, Rochester Airsoft, good friend of ours, a really fun field over here in Western New York. I had a couple of coworkers come out with me, and one was looking up guns on his phone on Amazon. And it's remarkably unclear how shitty literally all those guns are, just with how vague a lot of brands are and stuff like that. Like, there's just no one out there kind of saying, hey, don't, if you want to spend $48, hell, let alone more, on an Amazon gun, just throw it in the trash. So if we get nothing else out there in terms of a message, I think it's mission accomplished.
Fair enough.
Even if we get nothing else out there, rather. So we are at this point diving right into the myth busting, the brunt of the show. First point was eye protection. So, why do we need it?
Oh, we don't.
Keeps the BBs out of your eyes. That's a good start.
Yep. You only get 2 and they don't grow back.
That's true.
All heard it.
And I have seen airsoft injuries as a result of being hit in the gut or hit in the face with an airsoft BB at close range with no eye protection. And thankfully, that person did actually recover their sight, but in most cases, you do not have much of a chance. It's you're either going to have some kind of blind spot or some pretty serious eye damage, detached retinas, things of that nature that will either cause you permanent damage or serious, like up to and including blindness, or just serious eye health issues throughout your life. So definitely not worth screwing with.
Absolutely. The principal point I wrote this down for to touch on was, again, just approaching it as much as we can, from the perspective of, busting some kind of misconception or myth, is that if it's allowed, I don't know anywhere, I don't know if it's even legal now that we have things, out in the wild, like airsoft-specific insurance policies, etc. But if it's for some reason allowed at your field, I think we should really drive home what a stupid fucking idea it is to use just like your regular old shop safety glasses and basically anything not full seal. Because you are just pushing your luck to such a point. I mean, you get hit in the eye, it's going to stop it, at least a few times. But, I mean...
You meant the eye, right? Not the glasses.
Yeah,
okay.
Well...
We're doing this for as long as...
Yeah, actually, real quick, Matt, I do want to step in and address something there. So, I mean, a couple things, actually. The first thing I want to talk about was the actual rating of safety glasses. You see a lot, and I see this is one of my, actually I didn't mention it during my intro, but one of my biggest pet peeves. You see a lot of like these Lancer tactical gas mask over masks, they call them, but basically there's something that looks like a gas mask that is just a shell that has lenses on it. If what you're buying is not ANSI Z87 rated, and I'm sure most airsofters have heard that terminology or that standard rating. Basically, that's something that's going to be that is a standard that companies that make goggles can test their goggles to determine whether or not they're impact rated. And that's an American standard, but that is generally what's used throughout the world. It's pretty well accepted as the actual safety standard for safety glasses and impact ratings. Not only do you need to see that Z87, you need, and if I had my webcam, I'd show you guys, you need to be able to see that ANSI Z87 Plus. When you have the plus on the actual end of the standard that's written onto your safety glasses, that means that they're impact rated. Just Z87
Which one is the you also sometimes see Z87.1. What is that interchangeable with? The plus or just the Z87?
Nothing in particular. Z87.1 is actually the full name of the standard for safety glasses testing. Yeah.
So the plus is something different.
The plus is what delineates an impact rating.
Right.
That impact rating, basically to have your safety glasses or goggles pass that, they need to go through a drop test where they drop I believe it's a 500 gram projectile onto the glasses from 4 feet up, and they need to maintain their integrity. Then they go through an impact test where basically they fire a steel BB at the glasses at, I believe it's 110 miles per hour for safety glasses and 250 miles per hour for safety goggles. And if you make it through both of those without having any fractures in the actual lenses, you're considered passed. So I mean, basically, that's what they're putting your goggles through. That, which sort of segues into another thing that I see a lot, rumor wise, is that I've seen this posted on Reddit a couple times. I'm not really sure where people are getting it from, but it's that safety goggles are only good for a single impact, which is definitely not true. If there's any serious visible damage to them, that's when you would take them out of service, and like in professional industry, when you take them out of service and put them into.
It definitely isn't hard to get them not foggy, but it's scraped up enough to be hard to see.
Yeah, I mean, even then though, that doesn't necessarily compromise
fracturing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that doesn't.
I'm sure
the safety glasses are intended to hold up to
with a sledgehammer, but that's general use. I've never seen it. And Tom, just another point you made earlier, how that's the American standard. Yes. I was talking to our guy who does the safety evaluations every year at work. I don't know how we got onto this, but he made a good point that it's thankfully quite tough to find anything below that rating, even for sale here in the States.
Generally correct.
Amazon grifters, maybe, if you were, again, at that point, you're out there looking for the shit, because there's a lot of places you can go out. Yeah.
Oh, God, I wish. Rare.
So, for a little history on the goggles, when we first started, everybody had just like the ballistic non-foamed goggles. And we did that for a couple of years. Then somebody got around that was real close. I mean, real close. And we kind of rethought the process completely. So then we went full seal. We allowed mesh for a while, but they had to be chainsaw rated. Like the heavy-duty chainsaw goggles, we used those for a bit. And then eventually we kind of all agreed and settled down to just having full ANSI rated, foam sealed goggles with no gaps. Because it's just, people don't realize how important their vision is until something happens to it.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
So, I think that's a good spot to close that up.
Screen share here, Matt. I just again, because I've seen this. These are quite popular, and I've seen them. I've seen this argument made. That is not ANSI rated. What you're looking at right there, they sell them on e-bike. They sell them all over the place. They're pretty popular. They're cool. They have the big fans and the actual filters, so they don't fog up too badly. There is not a single ANSI rating on these goggles anywhere, and they are thin, and they will not stand up to a BB. It even says that you're supposed to wear actual ANSI rated eye protection underneath them, which is frankly ridiculous.
Oh, okay, go. So they're that is what they say. Marketing wise, interesting.
For sure, yeah. Another Amazon special, same deal.
Another Amazon special.
Not ANSI rated. Yeah, right. It's ridiculous to even consider wearing those as actual eye protection.
Well,
genuine question from Matt. Yeah,
I see that. Yeah, that's a smart one, Matt. You absolutely could swap them out to something like Lexan. Personally, so here's my other take on that, and this is another interesting point. People talk a lot about like Wiley X's or like upgrade kits for goggles that are, glasses that make them ANSI rated. When you get something ANSI rated, the entire package is ANSI rated. So you're not actually getting just an ANSI rated lens. It's the entire safety glasses or safety goggle apparatus overall, because another part of that rating is that they can't fall off your face. Mm-hmm. So when you go and replace the lenses on your goggles, I'm not going to say that you're making them unsafe necessarily, but you are technically violating the ANSI rating of those goggles, because you're essentially modifying the goggle at that point by taking the lens out and putting a new one in. I do that on my own ESS Turbo fans. I put the smoke lenses in there. Technically, that does make them, again, that does break the ANSI rating. Would I say that makes them unsafe? No. If you wanted to have that maximum level of safety, I would recommend leaving them exactly as you took them out of the package. Maybe clean, obviously keep them clean and stuff like that, but I would not recommend removing lenses or changing them out. To have that actual ANSI rating.
Cool. I think that's a good point to close that up with. We went a little long, which is absolutely fine because it's an important topic. Good on the screen share, Tom? You can turn it off yourself too, right?
Certainly can.
Cool. That takes us into gun flavors out there. So, I don't remember 100% where we really were with this topic. So, when do you want to pick this up?
Sorry, real quick. Tom, do you mind if I answer Matt's question?
Go ahead.
Really quick. it's not, as Tom was saying, it's the whole package, not just the lens. So even if the lens, you could replace the lens with something like 1/2 inch thick polycarbonate, something that in no way is going to give any kind of care about BBs flying. But if that lens pops out of the frame after the first shot, or if you take a bad fall, it doesn't do you any good. So,
Paul, I think a great example is the masks that you actually manufactured yourself, which is essentially, bordering on bulletproof as far as BBs are concerned, but you still wear iPro under it just because,
Yes. But even then,
was that the Michael Myers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And even then, it's not even 2 individual lenses. It's a single solid piece lens underneath the mask, and it is caulked and riveted in place. So that is not going anywhere. We did some kind of rudimentary, not technically anti-standards, but we did things analogous. As Tom was saying, like a 500 gram weight dropped at 4 feet, things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, pick your poison. Pick your poison, Evan. Do you want a neck injury or do you want your eyes to be protected?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah.
Oh, is that your helmet, Paul? Of it, yes?
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to that later, gentlemen.
Anybody else getting loud beeping?
I am hearing that. Yeah.
It's not on my end, I don't think. No, not on my end.
Odd.
Yeah,
tell me if you hear it right now. I'm about to mute my mic.
Nope. I think we're good.
Yep.
I don't hear it anymore for some reason.
Weird, because I don't hear it. Okay. So, into our next topic, gun models. The TLDR of what I was getting at with this is, understandably, a new guy might think something like a SCAR or an AK or a P90 or a G3, that they're pretty much all equal, or an MP5, ask me how I know, that they're pretty much all equally easy to rip apart, maintain, upgrade, whatever. And the point I just really wanted to drive home here, and I really expect some pushback if you guys have any problem with this idea, is to, for your first gun, get something fucking easy to fix. There's a reason AR derivatives, which Evan is an AR derivative expert over in the chat, Fire Force Doggo, and AKs are pretty much the most ubiquitous. And I would argue even AKs are significantly more of a chore to explore the inside of. But yeah, after we've established, what constitutes appropriate iPro, and we're looking at guns. Well, I would argue there's other things you want to look at before you look at guns. But if we're at a point where we're looking at guns, get something easy to fucking work on. Continue.
Version 5 gearboxes. I've only ever tried to work on
is that zeroed out by it being a TM because those don't break?
No, well, as long as you don't open it, they're fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The moment you do,
the Uzi was just, oh my god, what a nightmare!
I had one of those. And it was an absolute. That was the only TM that I've ever owned that stopped working of its own accord. Actually,
it shoots backwards.
Yeah, it's something.
It is,
and it's got a U-shaped chamber to send the air, like it's
a design. Yeah.
Anyway,
TM just looked at the real Uzi and goes, "Hey, it has a telescoping bolt." What if I tried to make that gearbox?
What if?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
What if we tried to replicate that feature for no good reason?
I want to Google this.
We should is try and get Pocket in here. He's actually been working on like Polar Star. He Polar Starred an Uzi with Cookie. He's got I think 6 or 5 Uzis, TM Uzis. Cookie has, I don't know, some in the neighborhood of 20 or 80 mags for each loadout impression.
Jesus.
Like he shows up with this box on his chest with like 40 mags in it or 80 mags. And he just shoot, and just drops a pile. It's hysterical. Any case, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah. So what would I guess my question for the panel here is, what direction would you guys advise newer folks go as far as their first gun?
Oh, you get some really wild answers here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a hot. Yeah, if I may start. I will actually disagree with your initial premise, Matt. Just immediately.
I came up with it 35 seconds ago. So.
Fair. Well, you said pick something easy to fix. That on.
Okay. Yes. No.
On principle. Yeah. On principle, I love that. As a person who's technically inclined. But not everyone has to, and not everyone should work on their gun. And so I don't think that should necessarily be a requirement. Honestly, I'd say pick something you like from a reputable company, and by and large, that'll do you well, as long as you don't take it apart, because that is 90% of where the issues begin, is if you don't know what you're doing and you take it apart, it's not whatever happens after, it's never going to be as good as it was. It doesn't matter if you got TM, Cyma, Classic Army, anything. So I would say, yeah, parts availability, definitely a consideration. Again, that goes under serviceability. I think as long as it works well out the gate, there's a lot of manufacturers that as long as you don't touch it, that thing will run for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. As long as you don't change it, with obviously some exceptions. But by and large, things are pretty reasonable, I would say.
Those are good points. Yeah. I guess I was coming at the perspective of assuming we've hit our first breakdown already, which I did not say, and I'll own up to that. But even just in the terms of, what is it? Evan just derailed me.
Evan's just killing me. Oh.
Evan, it's time to stop.
No, he's fine. Let him go. Let him
go. Yeah. Well, there's no funny business in the chat, which is why I had him tune in. So I mean, he's got to make his own.
Doing good job.
Fine.
Yep.
Where was I?
Derailed.
Yeah, well, yeah, I knew
Success.
Anyway,
you were saying about justifying the M4 as being the variant that you would recommend.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess I overestimated how important it is to do things like barrel cleanings once in a while. Because I'm coming at the perspective of, okay, I don't think I've, taken a barrel out of anything but an AR derivative and not been aggravated inside of 15 minutes. I think the last gun I ripped open was my old ICS MP5s. Those have at least twice as many screws anchoring in the hop up. The receiver comes apart totally differently and way more aggravatingly. And that was just the perspective I was thinking about it through. But I will co-sign most of Paul's points. I like his take on that more. If you're getting something you like from a reputable dealer, I guess that cuts the connection to any possible connection to these problems in the first place. At which point you're having fun. So
yeah, I'd echo Paul there. My general philosophy: I have never, believe it or not, actually had an airsoft gun break on me on the field, which is astonishing. But for considering how long I've been playing, but I would say that the best general strategy that you can adopt is essentially exactly what Paul said: buy a gun from a company that actually, makes decent gearboxes and knows how to put one together. And make sure that you're not opening it and really playing with it. I don't tech the vast majority of my guns, and most of them are just completely bone stock. I have a TM G3 SAS that has been airsofting about as long as I have. The thing's probably 15 years old and has not skipped a beat, apart from losing a little bit of power over the years just from, the spring starting to wear out. I have a bunch of guns, again, all bone stock, all work perfectly fine. I think when people start getting into troubles when they want to do their own teching on it, and going from there. If your gun does break,
not fixing things that have broken.
Correct. Yeah, generally.
Yeah.
And fixing things though, I was going to say, if your gun does break, take it to somebody that you trust. I mean, obviously there's no certification for airsoft techs. I mean, you basically just have to find somebody that is legit and can actually fix your gun. Because once you open up that gun and let the magic
podcasting though.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Once you open up that gun and let the magic smoke out, it is basically whatever they've done in the factory is never happening again, like Paul said. So you basically just have to start thinking about, what you can do to either make the gun more reliable or what you can do to actually put it together in a way that most closely resembles what they tried to do in the factory when they made it initially. And that can be pretty tough to do.
It's a good point. I mean, if no one's heartbroken, I think we'll close it up there, because my next point was good starter guns, specifically the next item on the list, rather. If we had to make a top three, what would each of your contributions be? So, we'll go Paul, Tom, Mike.
Sure. So first I'd like to say, kind of engaging with the audience, I think Fire Force Doggo made an excellent point there where he says it's important to do your research, because certain brands, we might say today, if we upload this video and people are looking at it in posterity, it might not be valid a few years from now. Things like that. Certain companies, unfortunately, do go through kind kind of ebbs and flows of the quality of their QC. That's just an unfortunate truth of the industry, especially with a lot of things coming from China, where you can have just a wide variety of quality coming up. Yeah. So as far as good starter guns,
right now in July of 2021. That's a good caveat.
To date this, in July of 2021, I would say anything from the CYMA CM04 series, so like CM041, CM042, they're all different AKs of different flavors. But the 40 series specifically is based off of VFC, so they use their takedown system. So it's not a bunch of screws. It's a lot of a lot more like pins and things like that give for sturdier external construction. And I've owned a few of them in that series, purchased over a couple of years, and their QC seems to be pretty consistent, possibly increasing in quality over time. And at any rate, they're generally pretty cheap as far as standards go. So for a starter that wants to give it a try, wants something that can certainly go the distance if they want to stay in the sport, but doesn't break the bank if they want to try it out and decide they want something different, I think that's a good compromise.
And that's CYMA's, those are all AKs, you said?
Yes. For full disclosure, I have a bias because I collect a lot of Comblock stuff. I generally tend to prefer AK pattern rifles of various.
No, it's a good point. And actually, it's inspired me to shake up the premise just briefly as we move forward. Tom, I'm going to force you to recommend an AR derivative. Mike, you have carte blanche if it's not, beyond besides M4s or AKs. Tom,
Sure.
go.
In 2021, frankly, I couldn't tell you what these days works. My first and I'm gonna try to immediately break this by seconding Paul's recommendation of the CMO4 series. They just run like absolute friggin' tops. I have never heard of anybody that has owned one of those that if they didn't open it up, I don't think I've ever heard of one breaking. ARs, I've had good luck with G&G. Although that said, I have heard of problems with a lot of their ARs in recent years. So
interesting.
Couldn't tell you. I don't run enough ARs to really give a good assessment there. I will also say that pretty much anything, just to throw it out there, being completely generic, not even looking at specific gun models, things that will never break, as I mentioned, Tokyo Maruis. If you have a little bit more scratch to throw at a gun, they're not super high powered. They have absolutely excellent hop-ups in them, so they shoot very competitively with even higher powered guns just by virtue of having the range. They shoot low power. They're Japanese guns, so they actually shoot under 1 joule for legal reasons. But they are the original
JOULE.
Correct. We're not smoking here. They're the actual designers of the original AEG concept. They came up with the whole. They came up with the concept of the gearbox, and they know how to put one together. And they will run quite literally forever if you don't mess around with them, feed them good ammo, run decent mags in them, and don't throw them down a cliff.
Cool. They're also not stupid money either, so TM is a valid suggestion.
Not completely insane. Right. They're pretty expensive stateside, probably maybe not twice as expensive as a clone gun, but approaching that kind of money. Again, if you have that kind of money to throw at it, highly recommend it. Yeah.
And if you don't, this isn't your hobby. So, fair. Mike, what would you put as the not the capstone, but number 3 is if it's not no ARs, no AKs in July of 2021.
So I'm old, so anything that TM makes, I don't care what. I'll start out with saying the Tokyo Maruis M14 series originated a click hop up that actually locks in place. So once you set this thing, it stays the same forever.
Yep.
Now, I'm saying this because I had one that I ran for the better part of 2.5 years, and with a 120 short spring in it, I was able to outrange most of the local guys' real hot guns. One of the guys had a system at PTW, had the 150 cylinder, thought that was hot shit. And then when I was outranging him consistently, I was the bad guy. Any case, Tokyo Marui, again, I can't say enough about it that says good. But flipping from that over to more of the modern stuff that's out now, APS is currently my favorite as far as bolt action sniper rifles. The APS stuff is absolutely fantastic. They had a just variety of, if you wanted to get into like baseline sniping, out of the box, these guns shoot consistently. I mean, yeah, okay, you got an average, whatever. You know, if you don't want to spend that kind of money on a gun that's already tuned, set, and ready for you, the APS line's really good.
Cool.
Matt, I got to step
What?
in real quick just for one hot take.
Okay.
One hot take.
Mhm.
AGs,
It's the only one you get. So.
and Paul can feel free to argue with me on this one too. AGs are kind of an inherently unreliable design overall. They're not badly designed. It's not a bad design. It's just that it's a design, and you can look at TMs for this. It's a design that requires someone who knows what they're doing to put it together, and it requires decent quality materials, which is not what you're getting when you buy the vast majority of AGs. To that effect, I will also strongly advocate for something that's HPA powered. You're going to be throwing a lot of money at it, and it might be something that requires tech work right out of the box.
Perfect
but HPA guns are
transition.
Perfect. Consider this my entry into the BB transmission.
Right, and we're doing 5 minutes a pop now. I have my stopwatch going.
So
yeah,
what
HPA
kind
systems,
of go HPA?
very reliable, very few moving parts. There's not a lot of maintenance that needs to happen. What do you mean?
One moving part.
Well, some do, some don't.
solenoid usually, but
Correct. Yeah, usually some SMPs, which that was Wolverine's thing, was their single moving part. They don't all have that necessarily.
Right.
Some designs are mechanical and have a couple more moving parts. Fire Force Doggo hitting with the classic response there. Yes, you do have to deal with things like a hose, unless you can work a way to get HPA or CO2 into a mag.
Well, they've got wraiths, the wraith stocks. They can put in the back of the
Yeah.
ARs, yeah,
totally true.
Actually, kind of cool.
But no, I will strongly advocate for HPA-based systems. Apart from the extra logistics of needing to have a tank and a hose, depending on the type of system that you're using, they are very reliable, very, very easy to tune appropriately. And again, really the only major disadvantage that I can see is the fact that 99% of guns aren't going to come with one stock in them, so it's going to be some work that you need to do, and you're basically going to be doubling the cost of your gun by putting one in there. Okay. And rant. Paul, fight me.
Okay, so that's the case for HPA. So to properly introduce this topic, we're looking at how the different types of guns out there and how they shot BB. So you have AEGs and HPA, which we've covered. Springers, we've briefly mentioned, which none of those should really need any introduction at this point. Then, what am I forgetting? Just all other gases, right?
Green gas, CO2.
That's what I'm saying. You could pretty much lump in green grass and CO2 in one, in terms of
green grass.
The fundamental experience of doing airsoft shit with them. So I think Evan said it.
I would disagree on the green gas and the CO2. CO2, you have the capsules usually, or you have a larger cartridge you have to put in and out of the gun. The mags are vastly different as far as the design. Yeah, functionality, it's the same, but the performance out of CO2 versus green gas, and I'm not talking about like pre-ban Tanakas, I'm talking about current guns, is pretty much day and night. I mean, your most of your CO2s shoot hot as shit. I mean, you're looking at probably 400 minimum FPS with threes.
Yeah, absolutely. CO2 also gives you the capability.
Sub 300.
Correct. Yeah, and CO2 also gives you...
I was under the impression there was something of a change in that regard. Is it the CO2 pistols that don't shoot that hot anymore? Because I remember running an op and someone mentioned they had CO2, and I asked, and like 20 people had CO2, but everyone chronoed.
Right. No. CO2 it runs hotter. But they also have guns that are designed for it, like that Hater they brought out, the revolver, that shoots stupid low FPS. But you can blow that thing off all day long. I mean, there's no way you can reload it fast enough to keep up with how much rounds you get to shoot out of it. The CO2 consumption is so small due to its low FPS. But each one's a little different, so it depends on what you're doing. Like the old WE CO2s, I think you got 8 shots out of them before they bled out. Like they were horrible.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think Evan said it best a ways back when we were talking about this before we all got booted from the Western New York Airsofters Facebook group. That's a joke. It doesn't exist anymore, shockingly. That they all have their own pros and cons. So you're going to be dealing with different issues with AEGs than you would with HPA, than you would with CO2, than you would with green gas, than you would with Springers. In terms of starting out, I mean, if your principal field is an indoor joint, don't write off a Springer tri-shot or or think you're really being shorted by the $50-some-odd price tag. An upscale one is what, 90?
Yeah, but for indoor they're great.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So if you're in a situation where you're really just playing at an indoor joint, or they're your closest or your biggest field, whatever, I think a lot of people out there think they need an AEG or something automatic, and you really don't.
Yeah.
Anything else for that one? If not, we'll actually be closing that up early.
Yeah, if I take up Tom's invitation to, and I quote, fight him concerning HPA, I would say, as Matt said, the basics options you have available for Airsoft is spring, AEG, gas-powered, being like propane or CO2. And then you've got HPA, and I make the distinction between green gas / CO2 and HPA because green gas and CO2 guns, as Mike pointed out, usually those contain the gas themselves somewhere on the gun, whether it's many non-blowbacks, for example, just have the CO2 tank directly screw into the gun itself, the little 12-gram CO2 canisters and things like that. A lot of green gas guns usually just store green gas in the magazine. Green gas, by the way, is just a code for it's just an industry name for propane with some silicone mixed in, just to kind of be a little less abusive on the seals over time, especially because a lot of propane has petroleum additives that can eat away at the seals and things like that over time. So yeah, just as a heads up, if you're planning on running propane, as a side note, if you're planning on running propane in a gas gun, if you're just using a propane adapter, try to go for the ones in blue tanks. Those are used for like brazing and soldering versus green tanks, which are used for camping because they have less of those petroleum additives and things like that.
I never knew that. That's okay.
Yeah.
Also, make sure you lube it with silicone occasionally.
Yes.
Right.
Very much so.
Always just that.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I would say kind of listing them. Primary concern, especially for a newbie, I would say is cost. Springers, always going to be cheapest. Always. Fewest amount of parts. They are taking comparatively the least amount of stress, so they require the least amount of engineering to make. They're always going to be the cheapest, bar none. AEGs usually and gas guns usually end up about tied, and then HPA guns are ahead by usually a good margin. I would say overall, for an HPA gun, you are going to struggle to have a gun with the necessary tank and hose and everything, all the infrastructure required to own one. I would say you're going to struggle to find that for under $500.
Yeah.
You can't. No, not even a struggle. You that is the base cost of your HPA setup. I mean, you basically tack on $500 to whatever gun you're buying, and that's your HPA setup right there. Yes. A tank, a regulator, and an HPA engine is going to run you at minimum $500 by itself. So
yeah.
And
I mean, if you're lucky, you might look unused, but
yeah. True point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also to the point, I would say to Tom, strictly speaking, an AEG can do everything an HPA gun can do. It just requires a lot more effort. The HPA gun will, in most cases, take the cake in terms of performance. An HPA gun has fewer parts that are moving, so it can be more reliable. It can get a downright abusive FPS and rounds per second. It can just
while still managing to not detonate themselves.
Correct. But it's going to come with cost and things like
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. AEGs are a good way to get I'd say the most performance leap as far as propulsion system goes is going to be between Springer and AEG. And as we touched on before, a Springer can still be very viable given proper context. A spring shotgun is fantastic for CQB, middling for field dependent, I would say.
It's important to note that you don't, or at least shouldn't be playing the same way if a Springer is your primary.
Matt, you took the words out of my mouth. I don't want to, obviously if somebody listening to this podcast then goes and buys a Springer shotgun is disappointed when they're getting rumbled by somebody with a $750 Polar Star setup in CQB who's spamming their trigger and basically getting full auto performance.
Learn how to hide in a bush.
you're going to need to modify your tactics pretty strongly to be effective with a Springer shotgun, or just have a lot of experience under your belt. So
Yeah.
Right.
So to kind of bookend what my point is as far as the different transmission types and the differences between them, for me, if I had to try and make, because this is potentially going online and being for posterity, I would say my catch-all general phrasing would be, they all suit different niches, but general purpose, I say my vote goes towards the AEG, because while it has the most moving parts and so is the most mechanically complicated and therefore has the most that can technically go wrong. Yeah. I mean,
the TM Mark 23 SOCOM is a really good try.
Is a fan.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah, he isn't. No, I would struggle to argue with that, frankly. But yeah,
that will do. That is a fantastic individual piece. But as a blanket propulsion system thing, my vote goes towards the AEG because they are the cheapest they are the cheapest to get into. You have the opportunity to do semi or automatic fire with nearly all of them, so that allows you to really get all the play styles involved, because there are still AEGs that if you tune them right, or some that are good enough out of the box to do things like sniping with, so you still can do that kind of thing. And of course, having automatic fire opens up machine gunning, like a submachine gun, kind of doing run and gun things, normal assault rifle type rules, and also the most gun models out of the gate are AEGs.
AEG, yeah.
So given that a lot of the appeal of Airsoft is the fact that it looks a lot more like military style rifles and has the proper dimensions, so you can use military gear and pouches for those types of accessories and things like that, I say the AEGs offer you the most flexibility in playstyle and the most flexibility in gun models. And those are honestly the big things that will make them fantastic for catch-all. And again, the fact that they cater to most every budget, I think makes them kind of the best general purpose.
In the context of
overall.
Cool.
Yes.
And if again, you guys aren't offended, we'll close that up there because we're going long because I'm involving multiple of you at once. So, Mike, you've been quiet. I'm going to have you let loose pretty much exclusively with this next one, and which is my, of course, knee pad advocacy campaign. This is at a point of being so serious where I'm basically probably on the verge of
screaming
registering as a non-profit to spread this message. But I just figured if there was one person here who had some fun story about someone getting hurt at a game, it was you. So do you have any kind of contribution here?
I could probably spend the rest of this session just talking about knee pad injuries.
Knee pad injuries, holy shit.
Okay, so here's a fun fact. As you get older, your knees don't work as well as they used to. And all that cartilage and stuff, it goes away, so you end up having more and more problems.
The show is brought to you by Octerix, by the way.
Yes, by all means. So as you get older, you realize things like, gee, I should have probably, worn knee pads forever, because I didn't, and now I have knee problems. And I'm older than the rest of you guys, but it's still it's sad to find out that my grandfather was in fact right when he said, "Will you please wear some knee pads when you're working on your floor?" Anytime you get a chance to prevent any kind of injury in this would be a good idea. Be it good boots, knee pads, elbow pads, depending on what you're running through. I mean, we've done some games inside some pretty sketchy places over the years. Broken glass is always an issue. You've got to worry about things like screws and nails.
Toxic waste.
Yeah, toxic waste.
Yeah, I've stepped in hobo shit.
Yeah. So I mean, you definitely,
it's a problem.
So that said, the only place in the world that I've ever played airsoft that I wasn't worried about knee pads is when we went out to California. And in California, they play out in the desert, and the desert is sand. And we took a knee, and I thought that was the coolest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I was not angry. I was not offended. I didn't have any jabbing thing in my knee. I thought this was fantastic, except for, I don't live there. So here we are. Get knee pads, guys. Seriously, get knee pads.
I think you need to go to a CQB field exactly one time and kneel on. It's like kneeling on a Lego. It's just like one BB that manages to get itself right on your kneecap, or like right on your patella, your kneecap. It is death.
As moderator Matt said in the chat not long ago, slam your knee down on a rock once. You're talking CQB fields, but you can do it outside too.
Yep.
Not a good one.
It's a whole new. I told people 4 years ago it's a whole new game after you make this $15 investment because you don't need $70-something Arcteryxes.
Knee injuries don't heal, by the way. You will need surgery. That you tear an MCL, you tear that cartilage, it ain't coming back. That is ablative. That's going away forever. You will need to get
twisted ankles, which
correct.
Cool. Well, we've touched on it very briefly, very early on, but our next one is barrel length. Does it matter, and why not?
I'm going to let you guys take this over because you guys have way more technical background on this than I do. So I'm going to sit back.
I'll let Paul take over this one because he knows what the fuck he's talking about.
All right, Paul.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the vote of confidence. So I've devoted a decent amount of research into the topic, and so. Basically, I guess I should start by saying fundamental principle of Airsoft, and part of the reason it's called Airsoft is because we can actually touch on that. That is genuinely valid point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, fair enough.
Real quick, Paul, you don't mind being maximized. I forgot I can maximize individuals.
No, it's fair. Fire Force, for those not reading chat, Fire Force Doggo asks, but what about barrel girth?
It's a good point.
And it is a genuinely valid concern. Sometimes longer is not better. Sometimes you want to go thicker. But anyway, jokes aside.
Why am I not drinking?
Yeah. So on principle, airsoft guns, no matter what the propulsion system, are using air pressure to launch a spherical projectile out the barrel. And so with that, we have to think of a couple of things. How much pressure of that air is, or rather, what's the pressure of the air behind the pellet as it moves through the barrel? That'll give it its initial burst of energy and things like that. We also have to think, what is the size of the BB to the size of the barrel? Because if the BB is bigger than a barrel, it's just going to jam. Or, to Matt's earlier point about cleaning your barrel, if there's any schmutz in the barrel that kind of reduces its diameter effectively or doesn't provide enough clearance for a BB to slip past, the gun will jam and things like that. So, and as far as length goes, what you want to do is effectively make it so that you have enough air to get the BB out, or you want that initial puff of air to have enough force to see the BB out without providing either additional turbulence, where you have too much air or too high of a pressure of air, or too low, and so the BB starts losing velocity kind of halfway through its travel out the gun, and things like that. And I'll use the example of AEGs and Springers because those ones are similar enough for the purposes of this argument, and by and large, this concern doesn't happen as much with gas and HPA setups. So for Springers and AEGs, you have a piston, which is generally very big bore diameter, but very short length. And you have a spring that is either pulled back by a motor in the case of an AEG or by you in the case of a Springer, pulls back a piston, and then it gets released. Spring pushes the piston forward, compresses all that air in the cylinder, and pushes it into the barrel where there's hopefully a BB ready to kind of ride that air all the way out the barrel towards whatever you're pointing the airsoft gun at. You ideally want to match that the amount of air you have in the cylinder to the air you have in the barrel. You want to exceed it by a little bit, but not tremendously. A lot of people have done a lot more testing than I have online. And people generally seem to edge around saying you want 1.5 times the volume of air in your cylinder that you do in the barrel. If you go over that, like if you go towards like 2 times the amount of air in your cylinder than you do in the barrel, you're going to end up having just a tremendous amount of air pressure kind of behind the pellet, and that can cause a lot of turbulence, especially at that critical moment where the BB ends up just leaving the barrel. And if it's got a bunch of air that all of a sudden still has a lot of pressure and releases all at once, that can kind of cause some turbulence for that pellet and cause it to be less accurate. So that's what can happen if, for example, you have a really short barrel. If you have a really long barrel, and say you end up more on the kind of ratio closer to like a 1-to-1 ratio, you're gonna see kind of almost anemic FPS because you're really not gonna have. Sorry, I should have organized my thoughts better when I started this.
I get what you're saying.
You're really gonna have just not that much force pushing the pellet out of the barrel right at the very end. But you do also have the advantage of not having the problem we discussed earlier, where you have all this turbulence at the end for the pellet. Because, yeah, I guess I should start. I'll introduce this point now. I should have said it at the beginning. Quick physics lesson. Force equals mass times acceleration. And as long as you have a force behind you, you will continue to accelerate. As long as there's not an equal or a greater force, or rather an opposite force really opposing you. So what'll happen is basically, if you imagine a pellet having a theoretical perfect seal with the barrel as it goes through, as long as the pressure behind it is greater than the pressure in front of it, it'll keep moving and it'll keep accelerating through the barrel. In real firearms, generally this means that longer barrel firearms will have higher velocity out there because the bullet is accelerating until it exits the barrel, and all of a sudden that initial pressure from the cartridge kind of detonating the powder and everything gets vented everywhere, because now it's not directly behind the bullet anymore, it's now vented everywhere. For airsoft guns, we're not dealing with nearly that much amount of force, and because we're not intending to actually wound people or anything.
Paul,
yes, thankfully.
Real quick, actually, while I'm thinking about it. Yeah, see that, and actually Matt basically just hit on the point that I was thinking about. Getting back to the point of barrel length mattering, it does matter, but not for the reasons that people think it matters.
Okay.
Basically, as Paul was saying, in the overall scheme of your build, it is very relevant. If you're expecting to run a big bore-up piston or something like that, you're going to need a longer barrel to compensate for the fact that you have more air pressure now. If you want to run some, or vice versa, if you want to have a gun that inherently has a very long barrel, something like an SVD, a PSG-1, etc., you're going to need a bore-up kit to actually supply enough air to push the BB all the way down that barrel. A longer barrel doesn't necessarily... Basically, your barrel length doesn't necessarily equate to on its own, doesn't necessarily equate to any type of performance.
Yes.
It's important to look at the length of your barrel in the overall context of your build. A longer barrel isn't necessarily going to provide any more accuracy. It is going to provide basically a seal to allow the BB to absorb as much of the energy that's being built up by the spring or the motor or whatever after that air is compressed and pushed down the barrel by the piston. So
yes,
cool.
So yeah, exactly what Tom is saying. Yeah, scale your barrel to your build. A longer barrel can hurt you if you are kind of just throwing the longest barrel you can in a build for no issue. But yes, to Fire Force Doggo's point about girth.
Yeah, real quick, good touch point.
Yeah,
we also talked about
so that I don't forget that. We don't want to neglect girth here.
Determine what they want to determine about that.
Yeah. As if you look around and you're buying a new barrel for your airsoft gun, they come in a lot of different diameters. And also, strictly speaking, BBs do too. Japanese spec versus just kind of general spec.
That's a good point.
Yeah, 5.95 millimeter BBs versus 5.98 millimeter BBs.
And they're advertised that way. We're not talking about just buying shit versus buying premium.
Yes, they are advertised to slightly different.
This isn't a play stupid games, win stupid prizes discussion. Nope. We're talking about different products.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Start by saying, kind of before I forget it, with the balance point, the barrel is not contacting the BB, and a BB is theoretically a perfect sphere. It has no ballistic coefficient, and it's not contacting the barrel to impart spin on it like a rifle does with rifling. So there's no accuracy bonus to having a longer barrel. What you're really getting is you're really trying to match the volume in the barrel to the volume in the cylinder. Again, in that ratio of generally about 1.5 is what people say. Now you can play around with that by not only playing around with the length, but also deciding different diameters of barrel and things like that. Like a lot of people, like the go-to always for a first performance upgrade people did was a tight bore. barrel and things like that. Yeah. And generally, this just means that as you tighten the bore on the barrel, you are now kind of shifting that ratio a little bit higher. So you're getting a little bit more force out of your BBs and things like that, because now you've got the same amount of air being pushed through a tighter fitting. So you're building up more pressure, and that's causing the pellet to leave the barrel at a higher velocity. That can still mess with you. As I said before, if it's over volumed, your pellet is much more likely to go everywhere. Probably for the same reason that kind of what Mike experienced, where a guy really at a really high FPS setup and Mike's properly tuned, much lower FPS setup had a lot more range and accuracy. Because that's what happens. You want to ultimately tune it. You can still have a very accurate high FPS rifle, and in theory, at face value, you say, well, yeah, it's getting more energy. You should be able to throw it further because you're giving it more energy. But unfortunately, there's a lot more physics at work than that. Ultimately, if I had to kind of boil it down to really simple things, I would say, by and large, your barrel is not going to be the first upgrade you do if you're going for range and accuracy. I would say...
Just a brief interjection, Paul. Can I share some advice Tom gave me approximately 5,000 years ago when him and I first met? We were talking about upgrades, and he made a great point that upgrades achieve one of two goals: an increase in rate of fire or an increase in velocity. I think in accuracy, but you're doing... I guess you're increasing... Oh, okay. Yes. So there are three.
There were three.
But I guess we should briefly touch on making sure we've asked the fundamental question: is this something we need to do? Because if we're consistently shooting 90% as well as someone who's been fucking around for 2 years, upgrading a similar or even a dissimilar gun, should you bother? Yes, because you need more FPS.
Well, no, I would say kind of, sorry, I don't mean to steal the floor away from anyone else here.
I just gave it to you, please.
But yeah, TM, I will start by saying TM, kind of the primogenitor of a lot of airsoft guns. They've made the first of a lot of different models of airsoft guns. As Tom said, they were the first ones to really pioneer the gearbox concept, and thus brought the sport into a whole new age and things like that. And so many companies have copied their designs. They continue to exist in the market and continue to enjoy popularity internationally, despite having to adhere to their national laws of saying you need below 1 joule of muzzle energy. Joule being Joule, is a unit of energy. That. Yes, and it ends up being around...
No, we didn't say what it is. I'll take that back.
To put it in units where American audiences will be more familiar with, that ends up being about 328 FPS if you're firing a 0.2 gram BB. That's pretty low by most standards of every other company that isn't based in Japan, that doesn't have to comply with that kind of law. But with the right tuning, they are still very, very accurate. That pellet will still move very, very well through space and things like that. So its time to target is still very competitive despite having a lower muzzle velocity. Again, balancing all the little factors I talked about earlier will yield a much better performance overall. It's not about having one thing maxed out. That generally won't serve you the way you think it will. Yeah, and as to also Fire Force Doggo's point here about tools and things like that, higher FPS can also just frankly hurt people. And something to consider is the sport can only
Tom is also nodding.
Yeah.
Or else he's fired.
Yeah.
For the record.
Yeah. The sport can only exist so long as you have people to play it with. Don't abuse the people you're playing with. I mean,
it's true.
I don't know how else to put it really, other than just if you go out to a game where we all play toy soldiers in the woods with the intent to hurt people, that's not a good look. It's not. You don't need to. A well-tuned piece will serve you a lot better than just going for high FPS. So
I'm not insinuating this is there's any relation here, but can someone explain Fire Force Doggo's Mr. Andy outburst? I forget what we were talking about. Probably injuries.
Knees.
That was back
knees.
Oh, okay.
Knees.
Yeah.
Is Mr. Andy a pivotal character in Western New York Airsoft lore?
Yeah, he's got some.
Oh yeah, you never would have met him. That's fair, I suppose.
He was gone before you came, but he was definitely a driving force in the community for a long time. Really nice guy, really good dude.
Oh, okay, good guy. That's good.
Yeah, no, good guy.
Yeah.
Seems like we had a couple viewers go away as soon as we got a little positive. We have to stop this, I guess.
Sure. If I may touch on one more point as far as what I'm saying.
Please. And then we'll close it up. Then we're getting into sidearms, which will be even better.
Okay, yeah. Just really briefly, I will bookend by saying, like I said, for balance and things like that, to what I was saying earlier, a BB doesn't really have a ballistic coefficient. It doesn't really... there's nothing special you can really do to it to make it fly much better beyond hop up, beyond giving it backspin and things like that. But after doing a bit of testing myself to verify it, and I've seen similar studies online, there does seem to be kind of an optimal muzzle velocity for a 6mm pellet, regardless of weight.
You talked about this in our dry run. This is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, a 6mm pellet will, regardless of its weight, has a certain velocity where it's a nice balance between kind of initial velocity to get range and how much air resistance it hits. Because air resistance scales dramatically. It scales exponentially, I think, with it's either
it's cubed.
Squared or cubed. It is cubed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's cubed.
It scales exponentially with velocity. So a heavy projectile moving at a low velocity will encounter less air resistance than something with twice the velocity and half the mass, by a lot. So
I am so annoyed that I can't in the chat right now.
Not your Paul, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So to that end, things you would genuinely want more FPS for is if you want to run heavy BBs. That kind of magical sweet spot I was talking about earlier, curiously enough, is pretty much right at about what Tokyo Marui guns run at. About 328 or so FPS with a 0.2 gram BB runs at about that nice ballistic sweet spot for a 6mm round projectile. And so you could run higher FPS and things like that. But you would want to use a heavier weight BB to scale yourself back down to about a 330 or so FPS muzzle velocity out of the gate. What does that get you? That you have a heavier projectile moving at the same velocity, you're going to carry more kinetic energy. So it will generally have the ability to go further. That is why I said earlier when we first did the introduction that more FPS or equals more range. That is where it comes from. That is how to make the best use of that additional energy, is to go to that kind of magical sweet spot as far as the ballistics of it are concerned, the actual science of it is concerned. So, like, for example, what you end up having to do is kind of play around again with the math to figure out, all right, well, if I go up to 380 FPS, what weight of BB do I have to go down to end up around 330 or so, or a bit lower? Again, 300 to 328 is about that perfect sweet spot that you want to do. As a thing to keep in mind, heavier BBs are more expensive. Generally, BBs are sold by weight. So you'll get 5,000 in a you'll get 5,000 in a bag that are 0.2s. You'll get 4,000 that are in a bag of 0.25s. You'll get less and less and less for a higher price, because now the company that's making them has to make these pellets that are the same exact size more and more dense. The manufacturing becomes a lot more complicated as you go up in weights. So you could be running 0.4 gram pellets that you have tuned everything perfectly to get that really nice, that maximum range and maximum amount of energy downrange. And that works great, but that becomes really expensive. So generally, usually only snipers use that because they're not using as many pellets. So that's kind of a little background there. That's why a lot of those heavier weight pellets are advertised as sniper BBs usually, because that is generally what they are most used for. So anyway, sorry, I went so
probably a bit
longer than we were intending to go
we got
for that. But that's the
piggybacking on that real quick. So
Yes,
we're
please.
talking about, hop-ups and how they affect everything. And, it's consistency has always been like the biggest thing for me is when you have a hop-up and you've got your gun and you're tuning it up and you're getting it to where you want it to be. I always try and use the same weight BBs. I don't like mixing it up. And, you have to realize the hop-up's going to wear out. So over time, you're going to get it to a sweet spot where you're going to be super happy with your gun. And then by next year, it's going to be shooting like complete garbage again. So you're going to start all over again. And, that said, like, we talk about like, the mysterious Tokyo Marui guns. I have literally an 18-year-old TM AK sitting in a closet here that we just took out 3 weeks ago and shot. And it still, to this day, shoots exactly the same as it did. We've never put lipos on it. It's got an 8.4 NiCad battery in it. And the damn thing shills still. I mean, it takes about a month for it to get there, but it drifts across space and time, and it hits the person. It's bizarre.
Advanced homing BB technology.
Exactly. Just a little napalm on it.
Right.
Just a smidge, just a tiny touch.
Just a little tiny bit of napalm.
We're glad you're here. We're glad you're still here, Tom. Everything's under control. So. All right, that takes us to the sidearms. Tom or Mike, what do you take this away, or jointly?
You want to go first, Tom? You want me to go
Sure,
first?
why not?
All right,
Sidearms. Matt,
So,
what is
just let
the
me frame
actual
it, let me
myth
frame it.
here? Yeah.
So, multiple times, there is one actually. On our myth-busting podcast, we've done 2 or 3 myths busted so far. Multiple times, I've introduced this nonsense to newer folks, and they essentially demonstrate, understandably, that they're thinking in terms of something approximating real steel, in as much as what they know about it from the movies, because these aren't necessarily guys who shoot otherwise.
Makes sense.
And they always eventually ask me, okay, I've got I got this much money to spend. What kind of rifle worth of shit and sidearm can I get? Implying you need a sidearm. Do you need a sidearm?
Man, yeah. Anybody, feel free to jump in and interrupt me here while I'm talking. No,
No,
you absolutely don't.
No.
In my personal opinion, as a essential piece of starter kit, absolutely not. I mean, like maybe really what you'd probably want more in that case is a backup gun. I mean, like something like a tri-shot just to have in your bag, like ready to go if your primary decides to go down. You can go back into the staging area and actually have something to use for the rest of the day rather than being completely SOL. But I find that I use my sidearm maybe once a game, and or if I'm just feeling like having a little bit of fun. They're really definitely not necessary as an actual mandatory piece of kit. I will say the one exception to that is that if you're running, seriously, you are way better served spending your money on more stuff for your primary, or honestly, spend $120 on a pair of VSS turbo fans, or buy a better pair of boots, or get some LBE that isn't going to fall apart after 3 games.
Load bearing equipment.
Instead of a sidearm. Not to say that sidearms are completely worthless, especially if you're doing something like running a particularly high FPS primary.
And
you might need a sidearm. You may literally be required to bring a sidearm with certain field rules.
Or stupid not to if you're running sniper where you have a minimum engagement.
Yeah,
distance.
exactly.
Yeah,
that's the key. If you have a minimum engagement distance, you will generally want to carry something. And for anybody that doesn't know, obviously,
not to just overpower you here,
sorry.
But what I could tell the guys that I've dealt with were thinking in terms of is real steel capacities, and I think we also need to drive home that middle of the road M4 mid cap is 100 rounds easy.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, most guns these
if
days
you're pulling a sidearm, it's not because you've run out of ammo, unless you haven't reloaded your mags literally all day.
I'll make 2 points to that effect, actually, Matt. So, one, high caps are a thing, and that is what most guns come with.
Right. That's assuming
you're
not using high cap,
at minimum getting 300 rounds. Number 2, most soldiers do not carry sidearms. By and large, like that is generally a rarity for either specialists or officers, that they'd be carrying some kind of pistol, or certain guys on certain missions. If you're doing, room clearing or something like that, you may be issued a sidearm for certain missions. Most people won't use it. They're generally considered kind of a last ditch in terms of real steel. They're not used that often. I think Matt makes a good point. Ask yourself why, in what case would you rather use your sidearm than your primary? I mean, it's more effective to buy more mags or more BBs or something like that for your gun that's actually
spare battery.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to perform better than a pistol, which is really just kind of something that's like a last ditch. It's faster than
depending on what you're into pistol wise. You could be you buy a spare HPA system
Sure.
For what kind of, how many pistols or how much money you want to put into pistols?
Yeah, Fire Force Doggo has it nailed. You absolutely do not want to be using your pistol for any length of time. It is used exclusively to either defend yourself while your primary is down for some particular reason, or to get to your primary.
Yeah.
Right.
To go off
I've never
of
heard
that,
it framed that way.
Yeah,
but
go ahead, Mike.
Spot on. Yeah.
The only
Oh,
time
Mike.
I ever think you need to have a sidearm in modern day play is if you're in a very cramped environment, like a very tight CQB kind of thing, and getting a rifle up to actually be able to target things quickly could be problematic. Sure, grab a pistol. Or if you're running with a gun that requires you to have a pistol, like a sniper setup.
I'll tack on to point one, Mike. Not only is every word of that true, but you would also. This is also assuming you have something lengthwise that's like minimum.
Right, you're running around an MP5 or something,
Yeah.
no. But if you're running a full-size M16 or an M14 or something, sure.
For sure.
But I mean, it's not really. I mean, I would rather see people spend the money on better goggles. I mean, you buy like you guys said, you get a set of ESS, the fan ones,
turbo fans.
Turbo fans. You get a set of ESS turbos. It's the last set you're gonna have to buy. Even if they get scratched up, you just buy a new lens for $30 or $40.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. You spend the money on things that actually are going to protect you, as opposed to cool guy kitsch stuff.
Sidearms are like, oh man,
They're fun.
I'd probably put them like
pistol
7th on the list of things you need. Yeah, I'm with you.
They're an
Mike. They're just
accessory,
for fun,
not
really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, way
Right,
more.
agree
I've
with
said it
Matt.
before. Other
agree
Matt
with
just said
Matt.
it now. It's a fashion accessory.
Yeah.
By and large.
Cool.
With the
Now,
exception-
I will say, if you're, this is for the more advanced user, I think there are some particular cases to be made for things like, it was mentioned earlier, the Mark 23.
Oh, the TM, yeah.
That does actually offer some performance that is pretty much, as far as I can tell, unique in Airsoft, in that it is essentially dead silent, or as close as you can get to dead silent in terms of Airsoft guns.
Yeah.
It's also huge.
What's
the
I'd say it's
mechanism?
more of a secondary than a sidearm.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very fair point. Other than that, really, they are more or less just a toy for your toy.
What kind of vodka we got in the nail gene, Paul?
Particularly
It's
needed.
just water.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
Yep.
Gin.
Like those. All right. On that note, guys, I think we'll actually rip into one more, and it is a fun one. Then we'll let everyone loose and ourselves for a little intermission because I have to piss and mix a drink. So
Fair
our
enough.
last topic here is that's at 7:30. Did I say that already? I'm sorry. Last one is the idea of getting what you pay for. I've loudly argued before that at a certain point you're throwing away money with regard to buying things like guns, bar a few specific setups, i.e. a $600 AEG is, a lot of that cost is reflected in things like the metal body. I've never had a
Upgrades.
situation where I've
Pre-upgraded
broken
guns
a blast.
oftentimes add a lot of cost.
Okay, you have
to
a
it, so
couple
you're
of
really-
those now, but
You're seeing a lot of that cost is probably being in the labor, honestly,
Yeah.
more than anything else.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. I was interrupted.
to do things like the labor in making things like the metal bodies. I mean, you have the. Oh, you meant ripping it apart and pre-upgrading it. Okay,
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Swap the parts out, make sure it all works.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I still think that maybe a $200 ceiling or max budget for your first primary is probably smart. Yay, nay, depends. What?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. I'll defer to Paul and Mike on this one, but I mean, two cases that immediately come to mind are having a particular performance goal for your gun. That's not something that new players necessarily have. I know this isn't a podcast specifically for new players, but yeah, no, I mean, so again, if you have a specific performance goal for your gun, I think it'd be reasonable to have a little bit higher price point than that. The other thing is if you're really looking for a gun that is like a particularly high quality piece, or that isn't just like, if you want something with a really high first thing that sticks into my mind, real sword guns. I've owned them. Paul owns 2 of them. He owns one of my old ones that is my main case that I'm using here. They're very expensive. They are made from honest to God real steel Chinese stampings. They are built. They're not just built like trucks. They're built like literal AKs, Type 56s, but AKs. So I mean, if you're looking to spend a little bit more money to get a particular model of gun that's going to be really high end, that could be reasonable. Or as Matt Mazer said in the chat, LCTs, they have higher quality bodies. If you're willing to do a little bit more work on the internals, there you go. I think you do kind of get what you pay for, to be perfectly honest. In some regards, if you're buying a Matrix pre-upgraded special and you're spending $800 on that when it's just an AR that whatever one of their techs went in there and spent 3 hours putting a new piston in and like an M120, that's not going to be worth your time. I think if you're going to be spending a lot of money, it pays to do your research.
Well, I think the other thing you can add to that too, though, is certain people get involved in airsoft to have a certain look. You want to replicate, the Fifth Octurian Guards or something, like whatever it is that look that you want to role play out for what we do. Mm-hmm. Let's say, for example, that person only carries an M60, and there's only 3 people that make an M60, and so you're kind of stuck choosing between, these 3 companies, and then price-wise comes down to where you're comfortable putting the money in. I mean, I've spent a small fortune in airsoft, and I've probably sold off for, an eighth of the price what I paid for it. But then again, I've also started now, as I've gotten older, I've started to collect more stuff. So, like, some people have a China cabinet. I have a cabinet downstairs in my living room that has guns in it. And it's all airsoft crap. It's all old Western arms. I've got a Tanaka in there. I think there's a Marusian. Like, it's all older stuff. And, I don't know if I would go through and actually, ever take the stuff out to scrim with anymore or to play with. But they all were part of a look that I was looking for at that time. So, like I have a Colt Commander, but it's got all the right lettering and markings on it. So it's authentic, but and it really is just kind of silly, but there's that. So, I mean, if people are looking to get into a certain look and they want to run around with, Leia's blaster from Star Wars or Han Solo's blaster, and that's their gig, then they're going to spend a lot of money on it. And that's okay, because that's what they're doing. That's their idea of having a good time with airsoft. As opposed to somebody who wants to have an M4,
what it's all about. Yeah.
Geeked out with M-lock rails and 25 things that attach. I mean, everybody's different. I don't. It's hard to say price point wise where a good place to start is for most people. If you're just getting in it because you want to run around and shoot people, go buy yourself a Cyma AK. Get a good set of goggles and a bag of BBs and some batteries, and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, like if you're looking to be a certain look or a certain image, you want to replicate a certain period of firearms, then by all means spend it. Because some of the stuff you cannot get, anywhere, and the ones you can get may not be great, like the broom-handled Mauser, like not a horrible airsoft replica, not a great one, but not a horrible one. But there's only one company that makes it. So if you want to have one of those because you're doing a German paratrooper outfit, whatever, and that's the gun you have to have, then you spend the money. I mean, there's that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm definitely in that camp that there are several things that I've wanted that only like 1 or 2 companies have made.
Yep, same here.
Yeah. So.
Perfect transition to my more general camo talk. So we'll touch on this one, and then we'll do a little intermission, and depending on turnout, do some Q&A after, which means Matt Mazer pretending he's not an authentic viewer and faking some Q&A. So
he's got like 10 accounts, man. We'll take.
Yeah, well, yeah, I have a few myself. We can log in later. So I've also dealt, again, this is genuinely coming at it from a myth-busting perspective. Back to a couple folks, one of my former coworkers, I brought out to Rochester Airsoft years ago now. He saw that old promo video they did. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
With
the Tombstone one?
I was at them. I don't remember, but it was a bunch of guys up in multicam, and he's like, "Whoa, does everyone dress like that?" And I told him flat out, no.
Just the cool kids.
Yeah, well, there's the cool kids, yeah, and then there's the cooler kids with literally anything but multicam. But do we need to show up in camo?
Nah, I don't.
Depends
I show up wearing a great jumpsuit, which is the anti-camo.
Show up in whatever makes you feel pretty.
There is that. Yes. I will co-sign that. But there's one thing that you need to show up in, and it's whatever the fuck the op lead told you to show up in, depending on what team you're on, or otherwise. I cannot wait to see what Evan has to say.
Fire Force Doggo makes an excellent point, though. Don't use hunting camo because hunting season is in the fall. We're playing in the summer. Do not die of heat exhaustion. Yeah. Lots of hunting gear is insulated again because buck season and stuff like that is in the fall.
Right.
do not die of heat exhaustion.
And we've talked about what a bad idea it is to show up with the intent to hurt people, and you don't want to do anything that could put yourself in any more danger to this at an event for this sport. I call it a hobby. It's not a sport.
I think that
might put yourself in a worse position, as this hobby is already so innately unsafe as is.
As far as the camo question goes, I think honestly you have to kind of look at it based on where you're going to go play, who are you playing with, and why are you there. So we've been involved on and off with big game producers. We've got a big game coming up from Lion Claws at Grand Island in September. That Matt Mazer was able to kind of get off the ground, and after a couple of gentle nudges, it was kind of a thing. And I'm not comparing producers because I don't want to get involved in any of that bullshit. Everybody does their own game. Some games are awesome. Some games are horrible. I've been to ones that I thought were amazing by one producer. Went back again. It was awful. But I'm digressing. The point being is read over what they're telling you to show up in. If you're on Team A and everybody's wearing tan and you show up in pink, you're not going to have a good day. And the same goes true with most events. Just you don't have to read all the backstory and all the history and all the fairy tale fables, but you can read what fucking camouflage you're supposed to be wearing. Honestly, this is not that hard. If you're playing in somebody's backyard or it's a bunch of buddies and you're all going out to an indoor place where there is no restrictions, by all means wear whatever the hell you want.
No, 100%.
That's half of what I enjoy about this was seeing, all of this really cool stuff. And I bought a set of ATACs and I thought I was pretty badass. And then I realized you can't hide in ATACs. But in any case, my CAD pad was way better. But that said, you just follow the rules of where you're going to play. And it really, those little things makes a huge difference. And I'm going to stop there.
Cool. All right. I was just laughing at one more bullet point I had in the captions here. It was literally, do I need multicam? But it was meant to be to drop a little later, even though we've gone late. And Paul, as we close in on our intermission here, we're going to do some Q&A first, but later on we have, I'll just spoil it now because I've been vague about it some places and quite blatant others. Right around the turn of the hour, depending, we are doing military surplus show and share. So, do you have anything for in the way of a sneak peek for us at all, Paul? Or would you need a few? If you need a few, that's fine.
Handy, I guess.
Maybe some camouflage?
Yeah. I was about to say, I guess right here I've got some finished camo, but that's not super exotic. Yeah.
Barely showing up through the
those
camera, unfortunately.
Oh,
that's my old MO5 pants, isn't it?
Yep, that is the one you traded me.
I have those right here.
Yep, for a selling job. Yep, good old barter system at work.
Yeah. There's my top.
But yeah, otherwise I have to go to
if we complete the set bonus, we get +4 stam.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
In response to Eli's question, I'm pretty sure that was the Navy SEALs. They wear blue cryptech, right? Is that a SEAL thing?
Yep.
Hey, Eli's here. Evening, Eli.
You come from the water. That checks out. Yeah.
He was pretty excited that we're going to be doing this. So. Oh, I don't know. I guess it depends how many people showed up in the SUV.
Easy there. Yeah, give me a bit. I do have my clown camo. It's just in my closet right now.
Okay, we'll save that for later. So at this point, let's do a little break and then we'll do some Q&A depending on who shows up. If not, I got a few more topics we can rip through right till 8 o'clock, and then we'll.
How long are we going to be down for? Let the folks know.
10 minutes.
Okay, 10
Sounds
minutes.
good.
All right, you're
cool.
at 40.
All right.
Two.
Okay.
And Mike hath to return.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I even closed my blinds so you can see my ugly face.
You guys weren't waiting on me too long. I know I said 10 minutes, but I got back like a minute and a half ago. So okay, I don't feel bad.
All right.
We still like you.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Hey, we broke 6 viewers. I think that's our record so far. But this, I think on here. Oh, okay. It says 6 both places now, but there's again a little bit of a delay watching it on YouTube straight. But I swore this was lower than YouTube earlier, so I'm still What does Tommy? Oh. Yeah. Tommy,
there we go.
Come back yourself, can't you? Oh, maybe not.
Nope. You had to add me.
Okay. Never mind. So we're back, and this is not Pepsi in the glass, but that doesn't concern you. I am just saving some photos of some really fun stuff I have in the way of show and share material later, so I'm excited to show you guys that. But in lieu of the understandably somewhat low turnout, because we didn't really feel like, hey, John from Rock Air's here. John, we plugged your place only like 3 times. I hope you don't kill us. But yeah, thanks for stopping in. So it looks like I told a bunch of people, largely won't ever realistically play Airsoft, but like cool things, to think about stopping by around 8 o'clock, which was the originally scheduled beginning of show and share time. But we can do a little Q&A and discussion too. So what we'll do, I have a few more topics in my my de facto list in the form of my captions here. We'll talk about them while we just monitor the chat. Well, I'll principally monitor the chat, but you can all see it. And from there, if anyone has a question, we'll stop the discussion and prioritize that. But just so we're not having dead air for the night until one person has a question in 25 minutes. That's the plan of assault. So, where did we leave off? Oh, did Mike relocate, or did you just close the blinds? Mike, did you relocate, or did you just close the blinds? I can't tell.
Oh, no. I just closed the blinds, man.
Yeah.
That way you can see it.
All right.
The sun comes down behind me, and if I don't close them, like, you can't see anything. It's just glare.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I was originally trying to film outside, but...
yeah, not that you're missing much, but,
Yeah, so we talked about sniping for a bit in the context of other topics, and we implied that it has to involve a sniper rifle, but in the past have talked about how sniping really isn't, what it is in Battlefield Bad Company. I'm really aging myself. That's the last Battlefield game I've meaningfully played. But is instead a play style. I think, Paul, you and me talked about this. It had to be a couple years ago. But you essentially argued that you don't need a particular kind of gun to snipe, within reason. I mean, good luck doing it with, as Evan said, something that runs on AA's. But, whoever, take it away.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that sniping is more of a play style, not an equipment set. I'm of the opinion that you could snipe just fine with a tri-shot Springer for $50. And yeah, I think as long as you're sneaky and know how to stalk targets, you have a radio and do good radio discipline and can still be useful to your team. Important. I think you can do that just fine. Personally. That's my personal view on it, though.
Paul, drop your mic. You're a hair quiet. I turned you up, but I think that's only for me.
Sorry, that's right.
No worries. Yep. No, you were still good. That's a good headset. Yep. Who makes it?
Oh, thanks.
Yep, super nice.
I got it for like $30. I want to say.
Oh yeah, you said
Amazon.
It was a few years old, right?
Yeah, it's
super nine.
Yeah, seriously, I got it for like $30. Anyway, nice. The stream is not about that, so maybe
I like the LEDs. No, it's an Airsoft technology podcast, so we talk about Airsoft and technology that we use when we're not playing Airsoft. It's going to be. I give it 3 weeks before this descends into yet another gaming show. So, Mazer, one of our generous mods and longtime patrons, 2 hours, asked a good question that I think someone genuinely new would probably ask if they were tuning in. A good scope for airsoft sniping, or a proper scope, to quote him directly. What does proper mean, and how would it be used? So what should we be looking for?
I've used. So I mean, I have what I consider to basically be a sniper rifle, like use wise, and it's actually it trends more towards the I guess like the non-traditional sniper rifle that we were just sort of discussing, like in the sense that it isn't necessarily something that's super long range, like typical high performance type rifle. It's meant to be very accurate. Very accurate, but fairly short range and pretty low power. I just run red dot on it. I don't expect to be engaging people at the kinds of distances where I need a zoom optic. In most cases, in Airsoft, you don't really need a scope. I mean, they're nice to have, and I guess it makes spotting where your beams are actually going a little bit easier. But for the most part, 300 or 100 yards is pretty easy to shoot over open sights with a gun. The zoom is really more for, again, spotting where your BBs are going, or doing target ID, things of that nature. I
you
don't
took the words
necessarily
out of
think
my
you need
mouth
an
at the
optic
end.
at all.
I would say, with the target ID point, perhaps except in heavily wooded areas against people who know how to move around. Because I've routinely inherited whatever scope from somebody. I think it was actually Eli who was in the house that I sold it to me at one of our first swap meets at Red Brook. I think it's just a 4-ish power, whatever the fuck. Works great for what it is, but I throw it on my M4 and I scan with it quite effectively. Just at those parts in the tree line where you can't quite tell.
I think they're better for, like I said, I think they're better for target ID than for actual shooting.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Given the ranges involved.
I will co-sign that because most of the times when I'm shooting, I'm pulling a 45-degree. Escape from Tarkov the one game where you actually were able to put red dots on like a 45-degree rail?
Yeah.
On an AK with a scope, and shoot from both.
No, totally.
I was doing that shit all the time. So yeah, again,
Totally.
I'm with you.
I think that one thing that should be mentioned as far as the sniping routines is you have to be patient and you have to have a gun that actually where it hits.
Yes.
Like, I'm not saying you have to have a sniper rifle, but anything that you're going to use has to be. I mean, you have to know what the replica is going to do.
Yes.
As far as camouflage, you blend in your surroundings as best you can, I guess. But then, sniping is such a weird thing because like you can't achieve the range that a real sniper rifle would comparatively to a real M4 or an AK. Mm-hmm. That kind of differentiation as far as range doesn't exist in the airsoft world.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it won't, or you couldn't tune a gun to do it, sure. But I mean, your baseline guns that everybody's using, for the most part, without dumping a ton of money into it. If you got a bolt-action sniper and it's quieter, Eli joked about a Super 9, but I mean, those were actually fairly quiet for the horrificness that they were. They were shell ejecting. They had like a little rotary clip to them. They were awful. Like literally, the range was dismal, but it was interesting. Yeah, there you go. Airsoft sniping is shooting slowly while hiding.
John said it best.
Agreed completely.
Knowing your situation, knowing where you're going, knowing what's around you, pay attention to that, and learning how to blend into whatever you're working with makes you a sniper more than whatever gun you're toting, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Agree 100%.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, it's obviously the slogan of the show, Mike. Universal holsters. I believe they can your entire ass. I don't remember the context of what.
Yeah. So, okay. I have umbrage with universal holsters because they don't make a universal gun, and so the guy that runs Desert Eagle and the guy that's running, a Bursa replica 38 special, that holster's not going to hold both guns. Desert Eagle's not going to fit in the damn thing, and then the burst is going to fall out. So, yeah, universal holsters is a great like your entry level gear. You end up getting things like you get the cross draw vest and all this stuff that's really, really. You look at it, and you're like, oh my god, it's so cool. And then you go out and you play with it for 10 minutes. You're like, this is the dumbest shit ever. Like I literally am walking around in a pile of garbage. Am I guilty? Oh yeah, I had a collection of those cross draw vests that you wouldn't believe, every color, and they were all junk. And then the pistols fell out of them. Like after running fields for as long as I have, there's two things that you're going to lose every time you play: at least one magazine, doesn't matter what gun, and then your pistol. Immediately afterwards, you lose both of them. You lose your mag.
Pistol lanyards, dude.
Pistol. Oh my god, it's awful, just awful. So at the end of the game, you've always got one or two dudes. Hey, did anybody see my pistol? And I'm like, there's 40 of you here. So if you have a pistol and you're 1 in 20, you're going to lose it at the game. That's the average that I found. And then magazines, yeah, Woodland cross draw vest, man, no. But in any case, like just in general, like somebody comes out and they're like, what gear should I get? I usually tell them like, don't buy a universal holster. Get one that's fitted for the gun, the replica you're using. You got a 45, get a 45 holster. You want to run a Beretta 9, get an M9 holster. Like don't be silly about it. You want to have something that's going to retain your thing in there. Lanyard retainers are great. I've definitely used them many times. I mean, I used to use them for my keys because I had a little belt clip and that fell off a lot. So yeah. Surplus. There you go. Yeah, I mean, they make a variety of different holsters, and as mixed results surplus bring to the table. They do retain airsoft guns fairly well. Not so much about the real ones, but airsoft ones. I mean, anything that you can get that's actually designed for the sidearm replica you're running with is what I would recommend as opposed to a universal. And that goes with everything, pouches for your guns. They make like universal dump pouch things. Buy one that you actually like. They're kind of hand in hand with universal holsters. So
yeah, G's use G code, obviously.
Yeah.
Naturally, it's in the name.
That aside, yeah, no, just shit posting aside, I couldn't be happier with my $150 G code with the thigh rig, which isn't even bad to know that I'm not ever losing a gun worth at least as much stock, let alone, upgraded like it is now. So,
reach a certain point in time where your replicas are really important to have, and you don't want to keep losing them or breaking them or dropping. I mean, that's the other thing. If your gun falls out of its universal holster and hits the ground and it breaks, now you're off the gun too, and it was a $10 holster. So why would you? It hand in hand with goggles. Don't buy cheap goggles. Don't buy a cheap holster.
Yeah, it's not something you want to cheap out on. That makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yep.
I almost said don't buy cheap footwear, but you don't have to spend big on good boots.
Buy good boots. Spend $100.
Yes, but good boots are $70.
No matter what you're doing.
A good gun is not $70.
No matter what you're doing, playing or not, you're standing on your feet all day. Even at break time. Do not skimp out on boots.
Two things that will completely ruin your day. Excuse me. Bad goggles, you will fog, and you will hit yourself, and you will not be able to play. Bad boots, you will hate yourself the day afterwards.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I definitely think that good footwear is it kind of goes hand in hand with your whole knee pad theories. You gotta protect yourself.
And then bad holster. I mean, you spend $70 on a decent holster so you don't lose your $150 pistol.
Yeah, I mean, just the kind of
because losing your $150 pistol to a $20 universal holster is the most embarrassing thing that I could possibly think of.
I can think of some worse, but I'm not going to.
I'll roll that back.
There you go. No, it's again, it just buy things that are going to last. You regret it once. If you buy
once, cry once.
That's it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this is a question where we can assume our hypothetical player is at a point where he's decided this is for them.
Plus, boots you don't need to use for airsoft. You can use them for anything. They're a good investment, period, for life.
Right.
Totally right.
You guys rightly all jumped on me the way I said that, but it was poorly worded, and I agree that you cannot skip out on them. But again, I meant that we're not talking about the price of admission.
You don't need a $500 pair of Danners? Sure.
Yes.
Get a $100 pair of Merrills.
Yeah.
Don't go buy jungle boots from the surplus store and call it a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if you really want to have a lot of pain, you can get jungle boots.
That's a good point. That's fair. If you hate yourself.
Well, and literally have holes in the sides of your boots because that's how they're built or designed.
If you really want to have like a really horrible idea of like a reenactment of Vietnam, I mean, by all means.
Yeah. If you want an authentically shitty
there
time.
you go. That's right. When you go home, you'll have to go see a doctor because your feet are all messed up.
No, very realistic.
Yes.
Yeah, you're better off buying a set of Merrills or Keens or something like that, but something that has ankle support because, I mean, it's really easy to lose your footing and roll an ankle. I mean, I'm sure Fire Force can tell you all about that.
Yeah, Merrill's rock my main shoes right now. I've been Merrill's for 2 years. I have one last point left, and I do think it's one worth checking out, even at the expense of a little time before show and share, which is baby's first parts failure. What generally goes when in terms of components, and how do we approach it?
It's kind of a tough one. I guess it depends on the gun, to be honest. I mean, like, certain guns are known for breaking certain parts, I guess. Depends on what you end up with, or what you've done to it.
Attack it from that angle, yeah.
I'll start with, because I think the one and only gun that I've actually had blow out on me on the field was an Echo 1. And that was because Echo 1 tends to basically just purchase stock JG guns, which are like, normal Chinese clone guns, and stick a higher end spring in them and call it a day. if you upgrade the spring in your gun and upgrade nothing else, you tend to have problems. So from my experience, first thing that tends to go is pistons, and they tend to go the most often. Thankfully, they are cheap to replace, and if there's one part you do need to replace, the piston's reasonably easy, I guess. I mean, I guess not any easier or more difficult than anything else in the gearbox, but they're at the very least cheap. So, yeah, I don't know. These guys have built some higher power performance guns than I have, so I can probably speak to it better.
I would say usually most of my problems stem from hop-ups. Either bucking was going bad, the
Interesting.
little bushing going bad. Well, keep in mind, I don't really mess with my guns the first 2 years. I just ran them until they bled, and then after that, then I tore them apart and redid them. And usually, when I started that routine, as soon as once you break the gun open, every year you're doing maintenance to it. So it always has to be, like you have to sit down and look at it and go, okay, well, what's the issue? Am I having an air loss issue? Is it coming from my nozzle? Is it coming from my, hop-up unit? Is it coming from the bucking? Is there something mechanically wrong? Did I blow the front of the gearbox off? I ran a lot of version 2s, which were M4, MP5, M4, right? And MP5s, I think, and G3s. In any case, a lot of those, and the old days, they weren't you didn't have reinforced boxes, so we used to use the old boxes and drop like an M130 spring into it, and then jackhammer the front off. It's a good time. So we ended up replacing a lot of mech boxes. We ended up replacing a lot of honestly, it was strip pistons when they were all plastic pistons before metal teeth were a thing. And then motor height adjustments. It seems to be very common issues with a lot of players.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a real good one.
I think that was my first one. Yeah, well, I had the JG.
Yeah.
Mike, how many times as a tech have you had somebody walk into your shop with a gun that goes, "Free!" and then be like, well, this is about a 6-second fix?
Well, that's where it starts. And then you realize that this guy, was smart enough to get the bottom off somehow and threw a quarter in there or something, then jammed it all back. No, I'm telling you, dude.
Oh, fucking
I've seen so much shit that just...
he shimmed it with 4 pennies, just like he fixed his Xbox. If we're talking, in terms of 10, 12 years ago.
He found a washer in his dad's garage or something and put it in there on top of the motor to jam it in there even further. So it was out of adjustment, and then he just put a shim in there, basically, which then stripped out all of the gears and the piston. So when you pulled the trigger, it made that reed sound. I'm like, oh, it's just an adjustment. Me, clever man, pops the bottom open, looks inside, giant washer falls out. And I went, oh, that's probably not good. Yep, jam a screwdriver down the barrel. Just get it done. Phillips said screwdriver. There's a BB stuck in there. A kid's got a screwdriver just jammed down his barrel.
Real story, by the way, right?
Oh, yeah, real story. Yeah, I watched it happen. He needed a new barrel. But in any case, so I took the bottom out, and the motor came out, and it's stripped, and plastic pieces are falling out. And I'm like, kid, your gun's fucked. I'm gonna have to tear it all the way down and see what's going on. I opened it up, and 2 of the 3 gears were some teeth, and the piston was stripped out, and the whole thing was shot. And so, to fix it all, to get the new motor head, to get the new gears in there, new piston, and everything else, it was like $130. You bought the gun used for like $80. I'm like, is this even worth you fixing? I could sell you a new one for $150 from G&G. And, so he finally decided that would be a better route. And he just, I gave him $20 for the gun for parts. He kept the mags and the battery, and away you went. But it's, watching people and YouTube is great for things like this for, some people. But we're not tearing guns apart and showing you how to fix them yet. And, my concern with that is if you have no mechanical aptitude or don't have the right set of tools, I didn't have Allen keys, so I got these little tiny square-headed things, and I'm just jamming them in there. And I'm using my dad's impact, so it'll tighten down really good. And I want to go drinking because I can't watch that. But I've watched kids come in with these guns, and I tore this apart, not sure how to put it back together. Okay, fine. Paul and I have worked on guns together before, but it's different. He came in and went, hey, I got this gun and I really want to do X, Y, Z to it. Can we do that? And I said, well, I have no idea. We sat down and figured it all out to see if it was actually even viable to make it work. And then figured out the parts list and put it together, and it worked for like 4 days. And
that is something.
We may or may not be talking about his Dragunov.
Yeah.
But that said, like, everybody has that one gun that they've done a lot of time, a lot of money, and put effort into to make sure that it works the way they want it to. And you come into a store and you if you don't know what you're doing, and this is a big thing, just take it to somebody who does. Unless you don't care about it and you understand that. I mean, when I first got into when my first AG went down, I didn't have anybody to go to. We ordered all of our stuff from Japan direct, and it took like a month to get here from shipping. But that said, like, everything showed up. And then when the first one went down, like, I didn't have anybody. I didn't have a reference point. I didn't speak Japanese. I couldn't call the Japanese tech guy. So I took it apart, and that gun never went back together, ever. It was in pieces when I threw it out. But that said, the next one went easier. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then over the years, people started doing YouTube channels, and there was more information. And you could go online and find, an actual, like, blueprint of how the mech box went together. And you're like, if I would have had this 5 years ago, I probably would have more guns still up and working. But no, I threw them all out because I couldn't bear to look at them anymore. So there's that. Find somebody you like, figure out how to get attacked. Don't do it yourself.
If you're doing it yourself, freaking work on something that's already fucked.
If you do it yourself, my big point will be this: clean table, white tablecloth.
Yeah, that's completely
okay.
reasonable.
When you pop that gearbox open, it will fall apart. Things will fly every single time. Oh, it's super easy. Yes, it is. But if you don't know where the spring is when you pop it open, it's gonna go for a ride, and you're never gonna see that spring again. And yeah, ballpoint pen clickers do work for some parts, but I'll be honest, they don't last as long as the originals.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, the spring out of bubble.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
plate spring. Yeah.
Like guns that I would recommend never taking apart unless you're a tech. Anything from Real Sword. Ever. Anything that TM makes that's not an M4 or a G3 or an MP5. Because they have about 1,000 tiny screws in them and 17 springs that literally are just voodoo magic. They don't. I couldn't tell what they do. Been doing this for 20 years. Have no idea what to do. But you need to have them there because if you don't, the gun just doesn't shoot. It's weird.
Yeah.
ICS guns are really good. They have a quick change spring for most of them nowadays, and they're solid gun. But that said, choose your battles with your airsoft replicas very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a complex gun, you get an old top M60 with a whirlwind drive feed to it. Yeah, don't take that apart, man. Don't do it. You get what were the old air guns called? Tom might be able to help me out.
Air guns?
Years and years ago, they had a set of guns before you had LCT gas guns. They were called something. Daytona guns. Daytona guns.
Oh, sure. They'll still exist, believe it or not. Yeah.
Oh, it's just terrifying.
Yeah,
well, Cookie's got two of them. But the Daytona guns, same thing. Do not ever take them apart. You will literally spend the rest of your life regretting it. You just made that to a paperweight. It's done. They're filled with voodoo magic, unicorn.
Many little fiddly bits. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Cool.
That's it.
Well, yeah. Bar any questions coming in, which we will still deal with. That wraps up the extended preview of our first season here. So this is going to be a fun couple dozen episodes. We were talking earlier, Mike. We should take out a couple shitty guns. Organize when we can all get to your place. We'll do a live shop night stream disaster.
There you go.
Do that. We could definitely do that.
We won't tell anyone we're working on guns that don't matter to any of us, but
right. No, we'll pretend like they're really important. I'll lock the Tanakas up that night.
I got a few pieces I could work on.
Cool.
Is one the Dragunov?
Well, yes, I still have that one. I'm still
do you have a clean bench, Mike?
No, that one.
I'll make one.
Yeah, I still have every intent of making that thing work nicely, though. Because a few times I've gotten it to work for the time. Yeah, I love that thing. And the few times I've gotten it to work to where I wanted to, those are some of my best memories in Airsoft, honestly.
Well, you had it working really good once at Penyan when I was down there.
Yes.
And you were literally just tagging dudes like 300 feet out, and you were giggling. Like I could hear you. I would hear the guy go hit, and I could hear this faint Paul Karras going, ah. I'm like, really? He made that shot? No shit. All right.
Yeah, I've seen that thing at what did you bring it out to an op at Hunter's Creek 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, I think 'cause Tom was there too. Tom told me months later, I didn't realize you were test firing it without a hop. And it was like comparable to anything else anyone was shooting that day.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, because I've been trying like our hop in it for the past couple of years. So yeah, and I think it was probably getting some hop even though the lever wasn't on it. But yeah, I just
Okay,
didn't
so
have it
basically
tuned in
nothing,
at that
yeah.
point. Yeah,
But yeah, you were still slamming them. That thing's awesome.
Freaking nuts. Yeah. For
I
sure.
love that thing.
Yeah,
it is,
have to-
but it
When
is
it
a
works.
constant project piece. Yeah, that's
As
the
the show progresses, you have to keep us posted of its progress because
Sure.
I'm
I
interested in where
recently
things go.
got some. Yeah, I recently catted some parts and got somebody to actually make some parts for me because
Oh,
Real
cool.
Sword doesn't like make
Nice.
parts for him anymore. So we'll see. I gotta actually put them in there and see if I can get it working. But yeah,
Now, this might be throwing away money, Paul, but are they super rare? Like, could you conceivably find a parts gun out there? Not really.
that'd be
Not
tough.
easily,
If I
yeah.
do, it would be
Buku
even
money, man.
parts would be hundreds of bucks.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
That's not. Although LCT is coming out with the Dragunov, and
Oh.
I'm curious. I'm very keen to find out if they are making it like Cyma spec because I tried to use Cyma SVD parts, clone Cyma SVD
Okay.
stuff in the Real Sword Dragunov. Different specs.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, different specs. The Cyma has a smaller bore, couple of other different things. It doesn't fly. So I'm very keen to see if LCT is Cyma spec, proprietary, or what would make me immediately require new pants would be if it's Real Sword spec. I would buy one immediately, if only to have spare parts compatibility between the two, especially if it has mag compatibility as well.
Yeah.
I would
Oh yeah.
Even just
Oh,
that. Yeah.
that would make me so happy. I shouldn't give myself hope like that though.
All right, go. Well,
Yeah.
let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
So
That's if they even end up making it. They made the announcement. I don't know if they'll actually end up making it or if we'll actually get any in the US, but fingers crossed.
Right on. Well, I think we're about ready to begin military surplus show and share. You want to start it up, Paul? You got anything in particular you want to bust out first? Someone's already spilled the beans about a couple things, and it's
right.
definitely
Well,
wasn't our
he's doing
moderator,
that.
Evan.
Sure, if we like.
Hang on.
Well,
Paul.
sure.
No, you're good. I'm gonna log off while you guys do this. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
what?
That said, I'm glad you guys came out. Honestly, like I've had some really good laughs. Seeing some of the comments from the guys has been great, and looking forward to doing this again, guys.
Alrighty. Yeah, well,
Thanks, Mike.
Likewise.
all right,
brothers.
take care, Mike.
care.
Peace. And then there were two with cameras, but we already touched about that.
Fair. Yep.
Oh, yeah, we already did touch on
We're
barrel
working on that
grips,
for the
so-
next episode.
Fair. So yeah, yeah. Regarding pants, I don't have any super fancy pants, I guess,
Oh.
but I do
I
have.
thought you were just telling us
yeah,
unsolicited.
a poncho. I might as well start. I'll start strong out the gate and appease Fireburst Doggo here with give me a sec.
Lizard, gecko, clown, anime, camo. I don't know what the fuck is.
Nah.
I don't know what Evan uses words that are entirely correct, but sound absurd.
Here's my check clown camo.
Sorry, I didn't mean it
So-
to be
Next time. There you
too
go.
large.
Yeah.
Word.
Here.
I forgot I can
I
maximize
was about to
it.
say, is it actually? Yeah, is it
There
actually
we go,
showing?
Paul.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
That's cool.
It is clownerific
So
for
can
sure.
you,
Oh yeah.
right, I mean, were I to be able to find a set, I would be down to clown. But
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about?
Sure. So, a bit of history about that. This was issued by Czech Republic when they were a Soviet client state. Very short production run. Fire First Doggo. Sorry, shouldn't dox
No,
people.
he knows the beans are spilled. Yeah.
Fair, but yeah, Fire First Doggo could probably go even more about the history than I could about this. But it's very
The
interesting.
doggo is out of the bag.
Fair, yeah. But as I understand it, this was issued in pretty small numbers, mostly to paratroopers and things like that. Had a very short service life. I believe officially it's called Salamander Camo. I don't know exactly the etymology behind that, but it's under collectors and reenactors have colloquially called it clown camo because, as you can see, it is a very loud color palette. Unusually so, especially for a lot of Eastern European patterns of the time and things like that. So that makes it kind of unique because I want to say it's around 62. I want to say Fireforce Doggo can definitely fact check me on that. Oh, it was meant as urban. I did not know that. Huh. Fair. Makes sense with some of the more jagged edges on things like that. But yeah, I want to say around 62 is roundabout when it was done, like a fairly early Cold War pattern as far as that goes. Yeah.
Is it insulated at all, or is it just kind of baggier on you? I couldn't tell.
It's a bit baggy. I struggled to find one in exactly my size, so this is a little oversized.
But
they're meant as a parka, so.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, in fact, actually, around the hood, I'm not sure how well this is coming out on camera, but you can see there's kind of buttonholes along the collar there. Okay. That's because they were originally meant to have a detachable hood. I unfortunately, again, because this is really old short production run camo, I was unable to acquire a set with I was unable to get the hood that comes with it, unfortunately. I just kind of saw one of these in a buy-sell collectors group that I was in, and I just kind of like eyes went wide and was just kind of like, yeah, exactly. I was like, that is very cool. That is almost in my size. I'm going to snag that because I don't know when I'll see that again. So
right.
Now I've got it.
Right on, man.
But yeah.
All right, well, I have 2 pieces, so I guess we could go back and forth if you want. Tom, I'm sure you don't have anything to even talk about, Greg, because you can, Tom, if you have images of things, you can screen share.
Let me see. Yeah, who wants to see me Google for it?
Yeah,
but yeah.
Figure something out if you can. If not, I'll go. Because we can finally test run screen shares too.
I did not know the Belgians and Italians did that too. Neat.
Oh, right. We have Evan here to give us fascinating background, and I'm not even being remotely sarcastic. All right. My screen share is now up. Oh, Paul's maximized so no one can see it. All right. So I have a couple interesting things down here in the basement. One of them is, again, I just took some halfly decent photos earlier rather than try to show it on my webcam, which probably wouldn't even be bad. Paul, you can see what Paul's doing fairly easily. This is a Civil Defense Corps helmet. My father worked in construction around 15 odd years ago, or when he found this, and they were demoing some sort of warehouse or other kind of storage building here in downtown Buffalo somewhere, and they found a rack, I believe upstairs, or so the story goes, of with 4 of these on it. And I was just doing some very brief research right before we broadcast. These are about the size of they're a helmet. I'm not gonna sit here and give you approximate dimensions, but they're roughly the size of a Doughboy helmet. I actually have one over here, sanded down and repainted green for a vaguely. I think I did it for a Halloween costume in like 8th grade or something. That was one of the rougher ones we restored into a faux version of something else. But I have 3 proper ones too. Now, this symbol is indicative of the Air Raid Warden Division of the, I don't know if division is the proper word, but generally speaking it is, of the Civil Defense Corps. I'm not sure what they were responsible for, but beyond undoubtedly manning spotlights, possibly guns as well. I'm not sure about the situation at large. But I believe just based on like that rivet under the emblem there and the rivet on the right, those are, I believe, post-war, just because what I've seen of at least ostensibly wartime equivalents, they just have a slightly different shape, and which in turn implies they were made somewhat differently. Again, I've yet to confirm or vet really much of any of this, but yeah, neat little piece that we got all of. Yeah, we got 4 over here for free, which is fun. I actually, I think they're the 2 that still have emblems on them. I'm looking on my wall where they're hanging. Should both have the same. One's pretty much almost gone, or pretty much entirely gone. But I believe they are both. Yeah, this is the nicer one, obviously. Both Air Raid Warden helmets. So yeah, neat little piece. They go for something like $80 a pop on eBay, so it's nice to find out that you have something kind of interesting. Oh, here's the inside. Pretty basic liner. I don't know if any you guys and or Evan over there could comment on anything unique about these, but liner-wise, they look pretty typical, civilian shit hit the fan helmet to me. I believe that's an armband. I don't know if my dad got that around the same time or not. But yeah, it's a cool little display we have actually right by my airsoft gun cabinet, just because that's where there was room on the wall at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Eli on that one. It's kind of an odd shape. Doesn't look like your typical like doughboy helmet, like the more common during the war ones did.
What is yours?
Yeah, to answer, I don't know if Evan posted that this comment. Oh, cool! You can throw up comments before.
Oh, neat.
Before I said that, but I found Peg of an old chart of all the different flavors of the civil defense, and according to that, again, which I have not
talking about, yeah.
Which I have not, but yeah, it has the 3 bigger emblems along the top, and then a bunch of smaller ones.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tom. Yeah.
Yep.
This is again according to that, which I believe did find on like the website of some. I want to say some
actual semi-legitimate. Yeah.
It was the Historical Society of, I believe, some Western states. Some random county in some Western state. I want to say California. I can't remember. But it was somewhere vaguely, more legit than, Long Dong 420 on the, post-war shit collectors forums. And that is the Air Raid Warden's symbol, which is pretty cool. Yeah, actually, we, Tom, I saw you're planning to go to the Geneseo Air Show again soon. Once in a while, there's a couple guys there that have a civil defense tent with full impressions.
I've seen that. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, have you seen those guys? I don't know if that guy had a history of service with them. He's obviously an older guy, or if he had relatives who were. But yeah, it's just an interesting little impression to see stateside.
For sure.
So yeah, that was
sadly,
mine.
I have
Tom,
nothing to show, but I do.
Sorry.
No, without my camera. But you know what? Actually, maybe I can pull up a picture of it. Let me see here.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, I'll widen the net here if you have any pictures of some of your weirder airsoft guns, particularly the Calico or anything else fun.
Oh yeah, I've definitely got that. I do have, and I'll try to grab I'll get an actual. Once I get my camera worked out for the next time, I'll try to find a half decent angle of it. But Hellenic Air Force camo. So the Hellenic Lizard camo is pretty well known stuff. You see that pretty regularly. Let me see if I'll pop open to my screen share here in just a second. Oh god, the actual.
I know. I've obviously seen it in person. And I know what you have. So I
will, here we go.
All right.
Yeah, I'm popping over my screen share here.
Screen share away.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's a bit of a unique piece. I try to collect some little bit more random urban camos. See what I can find. I've got this. I've got a set of reproduction T-pattern camo, which is basically a one-off camo from an experimental urban exercise in the 90s conducted by the Marines. That's pretty cool. But yeah, no, like I said, I'll grab some actual. I'll get some actual footage of it next time we roll around to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where did you end up finding that? It's a neat pattern.
I just saw it on eBay, weirdly enough. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, Matt. It is the Hellenic Air Force camo. It's basically just a blue with a I think it replaces the blue replaces the brown in the normal Hellenic Lizard camo. It has a pretty cool look to it for sure. Apparently, the blue bleeds like crazy when you try to wash it, so yeah, we'll be avoiding that at all costs. It will stay mostly on the shelf, but yeah.
I gotta head out, but it's good seeing you guys. Good talking to you guys, and I'll
you too.
Well,
thanks for making the time. All right, have fun.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too. All right, and then it was just me and Tom sharing his screen, which is absolutely fine. I have one more piece. It's just my post-war Hungarian M38 helmet, which I think more than a few of, well, definitely Tom, but more than a few viewers have also seen. I was reading up on this guy earlier. Why did I max maximize File Explorer. Enough. Okay.
Very nice.
So I was reading up on this here, and just per the, you can even see the civil defense armband poking out on the same shelf. I moved it over earlier.
Mm.
Oh, and my cigar collection will probably get banned now, but that's fine.
Oh no.
So these were the most common helmet used during the Russo-Finnish continuation war by the Finns, which is kind of interesting, by a pretty significant margin too. They imported a lot of them. They are, in collaboration with Germany, a very explicit Hungarian version of the German M35. Like Germany actually helped them get set up to manufacture these. So they are, again, just from what very little I've read, very much a functional equivalent of the M35. The Hungarians have a little rougher finish the way they do them, and the rolled lip is signature to the German M35 as well. This one in particular is a post-war version. It has the post-war rivets at the temples, which is the principal indicator of that. But the whole liner is post-war too, as far as I can tell. This was just an eBay special. At the time, I was putting together a Finnish impression and thought that this was accurate, but it really isn't. I mean, unless you resigned the fact that you never really see the liner except for the strap, and the post-war rivets on the front are hardly sticking out like sore thumbs, but nonetheless, not an accurate impression. So yeah, that's why I've had this thing ever since, a few years ago when I was working on that little project. And yeah, I thought I read something else cool about it, but I can't remember now. No, just the Finns used this the most of what helmets they were able to get by between 41 and 44. And yeah, I forget what it cost me a few years back, but I don't think they've gone up.
Not crazy. Yeah, they're not insane, even for one in good nick like that one.
Yeah, another neat.
And yours has the original suspension and everything. So I mean, that's that's a pretty good find.
Yeah, I don't know. This was this is from IMA. Was that International Military?
IMA, IM. Is it IMA? IM
Yes.
USA? Yeah.
Maybe both. IMA is definitely I think it's International Military Antiques, or a stateside.
Great website. Great website.
Yeah, they bought I think they still have plenty, but they bought a fuck ton of these whenever from I believe the Finnish government, who are surplusing them out. And yeah, it's a neat little helmet. I don't know if it's ever seen service, or it does have a size marker somewhere. I think they were marked like 1 and 2 or something, which was one was smaller of the two sizes. It was between, I want to say like a 57 and a 59 hats, metric hat size.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger one was like 60 to 62 or whatever.
Yeah, it checks out.
User, right? Well, I think that's yeah, everything I had in the flesh, but I do have. Just catching up on the chat. Oh, okay, not much going on. I also used to have a cool. I'm going to screen share again in a second when I find a good picture of one. A World War I Swiss helmet of all things. Tom, you saw that at one point. The Cobra Commander helmet.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's the M1840, because it was obviously also potentially used in World War II. Yeah, this thing's kind of cool. Actually, I ended up giving it to a cohort of me and Mike's for some sort of project for. I believe it was originally going to be over at the Airsoft field, but yeah. Where did that image just drop? Boom. Yeah, remember this thing, Tom?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Classic style, imitated by many. Russians like that style of helmet as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got for maybe $50 from my dad's coworker who collects. It was a bit of a deal. I got rid of it for at least as much. Again, to a buddy with a money discount, all that jazz, and I'm obviously always happy to help out if someone's going to use it for something. But yeah, neat old piece I used to have. That's pretty much all. Just for some reason sticking with a headwear theme this evening in terms of my collection. But yeah, what do you got, Andy? Even just Google images of things that you actually have?
I'm trying to think. I'm not really a huge milsurp collector, believe it or not. I mean, I do have. I guess I have some. I've been thinking about getting into collecting like inert ordnance and stuff like that, but in terms of equipment that I can actually use, not really my thing, believe it or not. I do have a pretty decent collection of camo, like I said, a lot of Russian stuff, some stuff Paul's gotten me before, and I've made like I said, pretty fairly limited at this point, but some effort to get a collection of some interesting urban camos. But yeah, no, not really my thing, to be perfectly honest with you. I should get into it more.
Yeah.
Matt, did we just lose you there for a sec?
Yeah, I'm still here, aren't I?
Oh yeah, you're flashing in and out there.
I turned myself off, and I forgot that that's what that was, and then I just disabled the camera.
Gotcha.
So people can marvel at our incredible broken gear motif that I forged myself. And our, obviously, we were talking about Mark 23s too. I should have disabled everyone's cameras, so we would have to look at a Mark 23. I'm sure Evan would appreciate that, and Matt. Solid 50% of our viewer base, which is fun.
Yeah, right.
We got up to, again, I don't know how accurate these numbers really are, because it seemed like, multiple times I saw that they were displaying, their Restream was displaying a lower number than YouTube, but we got up to, I think, 7 concurrent viewers.
Whoa!
Which,
hitting
it's
it
a
big.
start. But yeah, anything else major you feel like we should cover here, Tom?
No, nothing. I think
I
think we pretty much covered everything. Everything in depth. I think it'd make pretty much a perfect first episode there.
Yeah.